long intro to make sure that people in the back can hear, and then they'll start to listen. Well,
Then they have a problem.
yeah, no, I can hear myself. So if I can hear myself, you can hear me. So we're trying to call this meeting to order, and I wanted to thank you for your patience. I wanted to talk to a couple of the delegates to make sure that everyone was prepared for the order of the agenda and our decisions. We have a very long agenda. It will be at minimum 3 hours. We'll be here at least till 10 o'clock and likely a bit longer. And so we're going to take our way slowly and methodically through this work. And say in advance, I'll probably take an adjournment at 8:30 so that councillors can take a breath of fresh air and then be ready for the next installment of the long meeting. Having called the meeting to order, it's now 4 minutes after 7, and the first item would be adoption of the agenda, and we'd like to make a couple of adjustments. First, we'd like to bring item 10.8, Urban Systems Capacity Study. I'd like to bring that forward. So it's actually the first item we'll deal with, item 3.1, and that will shift item 3.1, Michelle Sikora down 1 and Arwin McDonald down 1. So we'll start with urban systems. Are there any people here from the Drag Racing Association? Okay, we'll leave you where you are in the order paper, so we won't worry about you leaving early. And I think with that, just that one amendment, 10.8, to move to the front. Any other suggestions? Oh, and there's one correction.
Your Worship, I was just going to point out that there was some presentation material from SSC which I placed on your desks, and that the interim Director of Finance will have an amendment to 8.4, the financial plan bylaw.
Okay. And 10.5, the title should actually be appointment of Deputy Corporate Officer, not acting corporate officer. With those amendments, motion to adopt the agenda is amended. Councillor Inkster and Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? And that's carried. Moving forward then, we have item 10.1, which is the 10.8, sorry, urban systems. And Jeremy, is it? We'll welcome you forward if you can use that microphone. And let me just pull this 10.8. Suppose we should have a motion to receive the report even before you start, Councillor Inkster and Councillor Wright. All those in favor of receipt? Thank you. And we'll turn it over to you for a moment. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation on the expansion review we did, so I'll just jump right into it. If I can get this pointed this way.
Any assistance on where they?
Oh,
there it goes.
Okay. Hopefully my aim gets better as I progress. So this is an outline of the presentation. I'm going to go over the objectives of the expansion review. Then I'll review the growth projection and future flow estimates. And then I'll move on to the required upgrades and estimated costs to accommodate the anticipated growth. And lastly, I'll answer any questions you may have. So the objective of the review was to identify upgrade needs over a 20-year planning horizon for the Water Resource Center, and then estimate the costs for those upgrades. So this was a review to establish long-term needs for the Water Resource Center. So district staff provided growth projections for 4 scenarios, year 2020, 2025, 2030, and 2035. The growth estimates were provided in single-family equivalent units, and to estimate future average daily flows for the Water Resource Center, it was assumed there were 2.4 people per dwelling unit, and that each person generated 286 liters per day of wastewater. So the 2.4 residents per dwelling unit came from the 2013 DCC background report that was prepared by Bob Twerdoff Consulting. And the 286 liter per day allowance came from the 2012 design build terms of reference for the wastewater treatment plant. So that is how the average daily flow was estimated for the growth scenarios. So this table shows the expected growth and estimated future flows. You'll note that there's an allowance for additional 200 cubic meters per day of flow from the Sechelt Indian government. So they have an agreement in place for 550 cubic meters per day of the Water Resource Center's treatment capacity. And based on a 2014 study by David Narn and Associates, Sechelt Indian government is currently producing about 350 cubic meters per day. So if you subtract the 350, their current flow, from their overall allotment of 550, that's where the 200 allowance came from. So by 2035, it is expected that there will be up to 5,900 single-family equivalent units added, or the equivalent of 14,160 people. So we are talking about very significant growth that is anticipated. So by 2035, the maximum daily flow is anticipated to be 10,050 cubic meters per day. And the current plant is designed for 6,000 cubic meters per day. So upgrades will be required. So there are 3 separate upgrades that would be required to get out to that ultimate design flow. The first one would be an upgrade to the UF membranes, which are the effluent filters. The next one would be to the outfall to Trail Bay. And finally, the plant would have to be expanded. So let's go over the UF membrane upgrade. The plant is currently equipped with 2 UF membrane skids. Each skid can treat up to 3,000 cubic meters per day. The combined output from both skids is 4,500 cubic meters per day. So the membranes with that capacity will have to be upgraded when 316 single-family equivalent units are added. You know, if linear growth occurred, this upgrade would have to be completed by the end of this year. But it's always better to base it on actual flow at the plant and units that are being constructed, rather than assuming a linear growth pattern. So the upgrade will involve just adding filter modules to the existing skids, and that would increase the combined filter output to 6,000 cubic meters per day. Okay, so I'll move on to the outfall upgrade. So with the outfall, the max allowable discharge approved under the municipal wastewater regulation and the physical or hydraulic capacity of the pipe must be considered. So under the MWR registration, the plant can discharge up to 4,750 cubic meters per day. The hydraulic capacity of the pipe is estimated at 6,400 cubic meters per day. So assuming the full hydraulic capacity of the pipe can be utilized, the existing outfall would be able to handle flows from an additional 2,647 single-family equivalent units. You know, and that would occur in 2022, assuming linear growth, but as mentioned, it's always better to focus on actual flow data and the number of units being constructed. So when the outfall is upgraded, is assumed that it will be twin, meaning a second pipe would be installed from the Water Resource Center to Trail Bay. It is expected the new pipe would be as a minimum built to convey the estimated 2035 design flow. Before moving forward with an upgrade though, there are a few items the district should consider that are listed on this slide here. So the first one, you know, the current approved discharge limit is 4,750 cubic meters as previously mentioned. There was also a 2012 environmental impact study on effluent discharge to Trail Bay that noted the outfall was suitable for flows up to 5,000 cubic meters per day, but that was based on less stringent effluent quality requirements than the current plant operates at. So the max allowable flow that can be discharged to Trail Bay should be reviewed and confirmed with the Ministry of Environment based on current effluent quality being discharged from the Water Resource Center. This may require an update to the 2012 environmental impact study. So that's the regulatory aspect to consider. The next is the hydraulic capacity. So it's estimated at 6,400 cubic meters per day, but the district could do some performance testing to verify that. The next item is the remaining service life of the pipe. So you could do a condition assessment just to confirm what that is. And the final item I've identified is just water reuse. So this is potentially a big item, because if you, if you're reusing the effluent water, then it could defer or eliminate the need for this upgrade altogether. So once these items have been reviewed, the district can plan the outfall upgrade accordingly. So the final piece is the plant expansion. So as mentioned, the plant is designed to handle a maximum daily flow of 6,000 cubic meters per day. When 2,258 single-family equivalent units are added, or approximately 5,400 people, an upgrade will be required. The upgrade would have to be built and operational by 2021, assuming linear growth, but as mentioned, it's better to rely on flow data and the actual units that get built, because who knows how developments don't tend to proceed as originally planned.
Well, sometimes they go faster.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. So when the existing plant reaches capacity, it could be upgraded to handle the flows to the end of the 2035 growth scenario. The existing lot has sufficient room for the required expansion. So here you can see a preliminary concept for the future expansion. An additional 3 FBRs with greenhouses would be added. The influent lift station would be upgraded, and the process area of the plant would be expanded. The estimated area for the plant expansion shown here is conservative, but this just illustrates that the existing lot has significant available space for expansion. So here are the estimated costs for each upgrade. All estimates are in 2016 Canadian dollars. The UF membrane cost estimate is based on a quote provided by Veolia, and an allowance was added for installation. The outfall upgrade is Class D and includes a 50% allowance for contingency and engineering. And the Water Resource Center expansion estimate is Class C and includes a 20% contingency. The estimate assumes a similar treatment technology and aesthetic building finish would be provided. The Water Resource Center expansion cost and the required footprint is still under review. So this is just a preliminary estimate. The cost and the size of the footprint may decrease based on our final review. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We've been looking forward to this. I have a number of questions, but I'll defer to council first. But just to clarify, if using linear projections, we're looking at a $22 million plus upgrade in 6 years.
Yeah. And,
just want to be real clear so everybody can hear it. $22.7 million upgrade by 2021. Thank you. Councillors? Councillor Inkster. Yeah. Lots of exciting things are going to happen tonight, so I'll try and keep all of us in a moderate, and I'm sorry, I kind of got carried away there. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. So that question was asked. I didn't. Did you say yes that would happen in 2021? We'd have to look at a $22 million expansion.
Yeah. The only thing I would caution is that it's based on a very ambitious growth plan. So I mean, we're talking about over 14,000 people. So if that advances as planned, that's another question.
But that doesn't include necessarily new people, that includes hookup commitments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sanath, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think out of the 5,900 units in total, there's about 300 units that are retrofit. Is that?
As per our previous reports, we identified a new sewer hookup for Area 2 and Area 6. That's coming about 157. And on top of that, in the 200 units, coming from not connected, but sewer is available for the frontage. Those are about nearly 200. This total about 350, about 350.
Okay, so so that, and then the commitments made to connect, but also to, further on agenda this evening, there's a number of units that are being proposed in our community. There's a lot of support for it, but a number of them will need connection, hundreds of units of connection. So I know what you're talking about, it's difficult to estimate in the linearness of the proposal, but there's a lot of proposals in front of us to connect. So it may hit that 2021 year where we have to look at an additional spending amount for the sewage treatment plant.
Yep.
It was what you're saying,
Yes.
$22 million. Okay.
And Councillor Mueller and then Councillor Shanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions about your population projections and how you did that. So was that then a extrapolation of historic growth curves, or was it?
Yeah, so the growth projections were provided to us. That's what we based our study on. So it was prepared by district staff. So I'd actually, Sanath, you could, maybe you could jump in on that.
So the growth projection we prepared based on the application what we have right now since 2008. Some of the projects, the development permits issued, but on hold some reason, but anytime they can proceed those things. On top of that, we added Davis Bay area as a sewer, future sewer connections, 3 different scenarios. Up to Avis Road, and other one is Selma Park, up to Avis Road, and then Chapman Creek, and then Wilson Creek. So 3 stages. So that's coming about nearly 1,000 units for three scenarios.
Okay, so just a follow-up on that then. Did you include average yearly construction? So we have a number of projects that are already slated or in planning, but did you include the construction that would happen just between now and then on a yearly basis? Was there any extrapolation for that stuff that's not accounted for?
I didn't get that. Construction mean that the...
So every single year in Sechelt, there's a number of permits that just show up. People want to build, have nothing to do with plans that have been accounted for previously. So I'm just wondering if it includes that.
Yes.
Okay. It does include that. An average, or is it an extrapolation showing growth?
Not extrapolation. So everything's included for the existing and the future growth, and as per the our application received that.
Actually, Councillor Mueller, the chart doesn't show that. And that was one of my questions, whether or not this was based on OCP scenarios or on the liquid waste management plan scenarios from 2000. And there has to be some sort of a scenario to give you your growth rates. And what we see on page 434 is, as you said, an articulation of all of the projects that you see coming on stream, but not necessarily the ancillary growth that Councillor Mueller is talking about. So, Mr. Vance.
Mayor and Council, I checked the numbers and they generally fall within the OCP mid-range of growth rate of 2%.
Okay. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. That answered 3 questions. Councillor Mueller, more? No? And any questions at this end? Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I noticed that the cost you have in here for the upgrade of the Water Resource Center, the expansion, the 19,400, that's assuming, I believe, the full expansion, correct?
Close to the full build out
Yes.
of the site.
Yeah.
There could be one more FBR and greenhouse that could be added. We're showing 3 of the 4.
Right, so it's assuming that if we're going to go ahead with that expansion, that we actually have that growth in the community.
Yep.
May or may not be the path we want to follow, given, projections of populations are just that, projections.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. So this just shows kind of the end goal to meet the needs for that 5,900 units that are proposed. But how you'd actually build out to that stage is another question. Right?
Right, so you're saying 5,400 people in the
There are
next,
5,900 units. It's over
Right.
14,000 people.
right, in the next,
It's 20 years.
yeah, okay,
2035
Right.
is what he said.
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Councillor Inkster, before I jump in?
So if you look at other scenarios in which you do single membrane construction, let's just say, and at what point do you need, is it 2021 again that you need to look at a single membrane construction? And did you do a costing for what that single membrane would cost? It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it would be less expensive.
We didn't, so the first scenario is just upgrading the membranes.
Yes,
The last upgrade would be an upgrade to the entire plant.
so it would be, you would
Like
do
all-
3 more though,
The
right?
majority of the equipment.
Yeah, you do 3 more, but you wouldn't just do one which is less expensive and you didn't cost that out.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
The one item I think you mean is the greenhouse or the FBR. So yeah, we're showing 3 FBRs being added.
Yes,
And you're right. You could just add them one at a time.
yes.
We just showed what it would take to satisfy the ultimate growth projection.
2035, but if you added one at a time, did you talk about, did you approximate what would that cost at that point?
I don't have a number
You don't have a number,
handy,
okay.
but
And you can't speculate even though, yeah, okay.
yeah, it's something we could put into our final memo.
I don't know.
But it wouldn't be exact, just 1/3.
No,
By any
no.
Probably
means.
could be 10
No.
or 12, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I have a couple of questions while you're here, and I'm thinking you may want to still try and catch the ferry. It seems clear that you were asked to do a study on the Water Resource Center expansion as opposed to population-based growth, so I understand that. I had trouble deconstructing the numbers because I would have been happier to see on page 434 of your report, the proposed connections in existing and approved areas in the primary growth, and then after you did that, add the proposed SSC development. So I had to actually work backwards and subtract them out to see where we would be at various points. So that would have made it a little easier for us. You said you used the design build reference points for where you were at and what the flows were. And did you know that we're in the midst of a post-completion review of the entire project, which will actually give us a practical work baseline of what's actually going on now?
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I'm not
Yeah.
aware of any of the details.
It would probably help feed into a more nuanced understanding of exactly where we're at, because I've had staff tell me that they've already hit 3,900 cubic meters a day in the maximum flows, which is at a 4,000 maximum, we're getting pretty close to that. So I think your average daily flows are very close to what staff are telling us. So I think those estimates are good, but I'm not sure about the maximum and when we'll hit those. Just one more question. The membranes that will be needed is when there's 300 more units in Sechelt, which is pretty quick.
Yep.
Given what we're dealing with. Could be 2016, could be 2017. When I read your report, it indicated that was actually a decision not to fully complement the membrane section was made at construction at 2014 or 2015. So was it very difficult for you to run through the documents or arrive at the fact that we needed to address that in 2016? Or was it sort of sitting at the top of the pile, or did you have to figure that out?
Yeah, no, it wasn't difficult to find that. It's shown in the record drawings.
That's right. So the record drawings, actually, when the decision was made in 2014, they knew that in 2016 or 17 there'd need to be membranes added.
Well, the trigger year wasn't shown in the drawings. It was just the capacity of the existing UF membranes was shown. So I just worked out from the growth projections that were provided to us when it would be required.
Right. And I'm not asking an engineering question. I'm asking a 5-year planning question, because later tonight we're going to be adopting our 5-year financial plan. And on the same agenda, we hear that within those 5 years, it's a readily available information that we probably needed another $250,000. So that's not your fault, but thank you for bringing us the news. And from what I read in your report, that wasn't difficult to understand. That was something that was well known. And I see Councillor Inkster would like to.
Oh, no.
Any other councillors? Councillor Lutz.
This is more for staff than for our guest, but, and I read that at over 300,000 for the membranes because of labor that's involved. And it looks like it's going to be probably within this year. I find that very upsetting that as a councillor, I was not aware of that decision being made around these ultra modules. And I would really like to know how the decision and where the decision was made. So I will be asking from staff for that information in the very near future.
Thank you very much. I want to say this is a really good report, and the information, especially on page 434, with the proposed connections and growth of single and multifamily in the various areas, when combined with the liquid waste management plan and the OCP projections, is information this council has been not asking for directly, but wanting for a long time. So it's going to be very useful for tonight, which is why you came first.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can all digest that information for a moment or two, and we'll ask the first delegation, Michelle Sikora, to come forward. And Michelle is speaking about the S&M Medicinal Sweet Shop and a residential notice on title. Welcome, and once you're ready, you just push the microphone and I'll turn it on, but take your time to get settled. Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm here before you this evening due to an order that was imposed upon us by the District of Sechelt regarding a large blue tarp that was placed on our property because we felt our privacy was being invaded upon. I'd like to show you what these are. These cameras were placed on our neighbor's home, directly looking into our bedroom and our yard and monitoring every movement that we made. Just thought I'd give a little bit of a visual there. And then I'm just going to briefly give everybody a little bit of a refresher course on our charter rights. Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the right to life, liberty, and personal security of all Canadians. It also demands that the government respect the basic principles of justice whenever it intrudes on those rights. Section 15 of the Charter of Rights and Freedom, equal rights. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination. The Supreme Court of Canada has stated that the purpose of Section 15 is to protect those groups who suffer social, political, and legal disadvantages in society. Discrimination occurs where, for example, a person, because of a personal characteristic or belief, suffers disadvantages or is denied opportunities to other members of society. This means that the government must not discriminate on any of these grounds in its laws or programs. I will inform you now that the tarp has been removed, hence the reason why I have the cameras here with me today. Not because of the order imposed by the District of Sechelt, but because we finally had a decent human being move in next door to us. This family understood the invasion of privacy these cameras have caused. I don't understand how the District of Sechelt bylaw enforcement officer did not see that when she came to our home on February 18th. This order was imposed upon us based on community charter laws. It was stated that under Section 74, the property was deemed to be a nuisance, stemming from complaints from other neighbors. The same neighbors that have made several false statements to the District of Sechelt and to the RCMP. I cannot get into those issues at this time as both of these matters are before the courts. I can say that there is currently an investigation being done by the police commissioner regarding these issues with the RCMP and the neighbors. It has been ongoing for several months now. Section 64 of the Community Charter, the authority of council under Section 8(3)H may be exercised in relation to the following: nuisance, noise, vibration, odor, dust, illumination, or any other objectionable situation that is liable to disturb the quiet, peace, rest, enjoyment of individuals or the public. We feel that the District of Sechelt could have in fact tried to remedy the situation, not by ordering the removal of the tarp, which was protecting our privacy, but by requesting the neighbors either remove the several cameras or to position them in such a way as not to disturb our right to quiet, rest, peace, and enjoyment, as stated in the Community Charter. We view the actions of our neighbor at the time to be of an objectionable situation, and the District of Sechelt could have dealt with the issue in a fair and equal benefit to all as mandated in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 15, the supreme law. However, now that the tarp has been removed, the issue is somewhat moot at this time. I would like to remind the council, however, that privacy is a fundamental human right, which is protected under the supreme law of the land, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Michelle. Any clarifications from council?
Question?
No questions. It's a complex issue. I don't want to debate with you tonight on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I agree with you that, and other councillors also agree, that the district needs to be very careful in neighborhood disputes and to ensure that institutional authority isn't used inappropriately.
Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Mueller.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just had one question. You raised the issue of charter rights today. That's a very important issue for all Canadians, and I'm just curious if that issue was ever raised in any of your interactions with staff.
It was, yes, it was. Back in May and April, when all this first issue started up, which is the other issue that's going to be before the court with the District of Sechelt May 18th and the bylaw officer over the inflatable air dancer that was in our yard, I said many, many times that this is an infraction of our Charter Rights Section 2B, the freedom of right of speech. There was nothing hate about that inflatable air dancer that we had up. It had the word marijuana. And I find it odd that in the last couple of months, there's been people in Gibson's with holding up signs that say that there are only two genders, which in this day and age is somewhat promoting hate and intolerance to some people. Some people may not understand that. However, the RCMP took the stance that they weren't going to do anything about it because those people had a right to freedom of speech. Where was our freedom of speech? It was taken away from us.
Thank you.
That was the second issue. On enforcement of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 34 is the key element, and again, it's probably not the time and place to talk about where rights are and how they exist, but the Canadian Charter of Rights is something that applies to you and to us, but is enforced and agreed to by the national government and only the national government. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. So, Michelle, obviously the cameras were given to you by the neighbor, the new neighbor that we've heard. So they took them down finally. It's too bad they didn't do it immediately upon going into their premises and give you some sense of privacy, and so that you could take down the tarp. But obviously they finally got to it. They handed them to you for demonstration, and you were able to take down the tarp. That's probably how it went, right?
I do have one question. Yeah. I understand that there was a closed meeting regarding this issue, and I believe that the RCMP were involved. Through the investigating officer in Vancouver, who's doing the internal investigation, she made me aware that she was told that these cameras were fake and dummy cameras. So again, it goes to my question, why were they allowed to be kept up? That's a whole other matter. But I'm not sure if the District of Sechelt were told that they were fake and dummy cameras. There were batteries on one of these cameras, which means it was being controlled remotely. So somebody could have been watching us anywhere. And I don't think anybody in this room would like that feeling when you walk out your door and have to look at these cameras. That tarp that was put up was right beside our bedroom. Having to open your blinds every single morning and see this tarp there because someone is so obsessed that they need to be spying on your every single movement. You know, and because of what we believe in and what we do, we've never hid what we do. We're cannabis activists. That's who we are. And I believe in this day and age, this is going to be worldwide. People have to need to get educated about the matter. I mean, discriminating against us isn't the way to go. In the state of Hawaii, they just passed a law that it is illegal to discriminate against medical marijuana users and cannabis activists. And that's what's happening across our country right now.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
The second delegation this evening is Arwen McDonald on the Sunshine Coast Rogue Arts Festival.
Thank you.
And again, once you're settled, in about 10 minutes, we'll switch that over.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right in. Here we go. So just a quick personal introduction. My name is Arwen McDonald. I met most of you guys before and or last week. Artistic producer for the upcoming Rogue Arts Festival with over 20 years experience organizing festivals. Lived on the Sunshine Coast for just over 6 years. Worked in the arts sector while I've been here, as well as a volunteer, predominantly the arts, but also local nonprofits. Whoops, sorry. Purpose of this presentation is to request financial support with the temporary usage permit application fee of $1,000 so that the nonprofit can continue towards organizing our 2017 festival. Just put a couple considerations here. So just a bit of a timeline of communication between ourselves and the District of Sechelt. Reached out in the fall to touch base just to see what we needed to do in order to advance. Then we had our first meeting with several committee members on December 9th, where they told us that we needed a lot more information in order to take considerations. So we got that and submitted a full and comprehensive proposal. I'm going to stop right there, and I did request that you guys all receive copies of the proposal. I'm going to take, by the way, you're looking at me, you don't have it.
But we've seen it.
You've seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. I also have a hard copy with some shameless self-promotion. No? Only a couple? Some people? I'll just keep moving on. Then I had a second meeting with some other more committee members, and as well as a member of the Agricultural Land Commission on January 18th. And from there, we decided that there wasn't going to actually be enough time to be able to secure the appropriate permits to have the festival on the land that we would like to, which is in the District of Sechelt. So we it's taking place at Shirley Macy Park in West Howe Sound. And we submitted our official request for some financial relief on the application fee. Then the proposal was brought, this is last week, and the day after, the fee went up by almost $1,000 for the Agricultural Land Commission, which we have to do because the land we want to do it on is ALR land. So just a little bit about us. We were officially incorporated at the end of January. We have an all-female 5-member board of directors who predominantly live here, members and board members being here right now. Mission is very clear, very clean, to increase the well-being on the Sunshine Coast through the arts, and we intend on doing that by inspiring creativity and increasing involvement in the arts by providing multi-medium-based forums such as a arts festival. Fostering social inclusion is super important to us, one of our top mandates. By offering a broader definition of the arts, thereby allowing more people to engage and participate. We feel that sometimes people can be a little intimidated by the word arts or the word culture, and so we'd like to break down those walls to make people comfy. Promoting collaboration between work with individuals, groups, nonprofits, organizations, businesses, and government to stimulate a collaborative spirit I've been involved in several meetings all across the Sunshine Coast, and one thing that comes up quite a bit is organizations, businesses, and individuals feeling like they don't know what each other is doing. And so we're hoping that we can help bridge that communication gap. And advocating for environmentally sustainable practices, which I think that we can all agree is huge mandates all across the coast. The festival itself. So we're a 3-day outdoor multidisciplinary arts festival, this year taking place at Shirley Macy Park the end of August. We have a variety of programming. Main stage, which is nonstop music, workshop series, which predominantly focuses on rural and DIY lifestyles. Creation Station is an interactive area where people can be hands-on building with local professional artists in attendance. Shade Forest, this actually we've already started, and it is flags made out of lumber wrap, and lumber wrap is a material that a lot of construction base, and it goes straight to the landfill. It's not recyclable at all, but it is reusable, and so we are reusing that. Human foosball, imagine foosball with people. It's hilarious and super fun. As well, we have a couple of programs. So our environmental awareness program, this is a program that concentrates specifically on minimalizing environmental impact. This year particularly, we are focusing on alternative transportation, biking. We use Share There, which is a car sharing program. We intend on getting shuttles so that people don't have to individually drive. Minimizing disposable items. We have a no water bottle policy at the festival because there are mass amounts of waste. And we have a whole team dedicated to actually educating people on site where items go between composting, the landfill, and recycling, as well as our community outreach ticket program. So this kind of speaks back to the social inclusion. We totally recognize that there are members of our community that, regardless of what our price types are, which are incredibly accessible, will still not be able to come due to financial situations. So what we do is we reach out to local nonprofits to see if they'd be willing to, and a lot of people do, facilitate complimentary tickets to their members. And those are people that wouldn't otherwise be able to actually attend events like this. Benefits are numerous, but just in point form. Benefits of an arts festival, particularly ours, promoting the idea of healthy communities by building opportunities for community involvement and creative expression. So this speaks to providing the platform where people feel comfortable to participate. That in itself facilitates strong social ties among community members, and that kind of talks to, again, bridging those communication gaps and getting everybody speaking the same table. Invest in supports local businesses and artisans as much as humanly possible. We use all local between our staging and our sound, which is based out of Gibson, our fencing, our construction, our people, our everything really as much as humanly possible. Even our ticketing is here, which is amazing. Showcases the Sunshine Coast. So things like this actually really put the coast itself on the map. Festivals, rural, small, community-based festivals are a massive thing in this province, and there is people that travel all over the place, and it's a key illumination point for a lot of tourism magazines, which speaks to addressing the need for economic sustainability by actively participating in the tourism sector. I think that we all know that we're straying a little bit from the resource-based economy, and tourism is kind of an obvious one to go to, and that's where we fit in. Just to cap her off, goals in the future. So immediately, our goals are to cultivate relationships with other Sunshine Coast-based nonprofits, social and arts organizations, and individuals for cross-pollination of ideas and collaboration. And I've spoken of that a couple of times. Establish a solid network of members, volunteers, funders, and supporters, and implement a community-based arts festival that has positive and measurable social and economic effects on the Sunshine Coast. We've been established for a very short time and taken massive strides, and I'm feeling like we're progressing actually incredibly successfully in those 3 points. Long-term goals is to create a sustainable destination festival. So to actually get our name where people are looking and they're marking their calendars and they're coming from all over the place to the Sunshine Coast to this event. Initiate and develop additional community engaged arts programming. So we don't want to stop there. I mean, definitely the festival is our priority right now, but in the next couple of years, we'd like to increase our programming throughout the year. And become an exemplary arts organization using self-designed services as our primary revenue source. So while we are in our very baby steps right now, we are depending heavily on the support of local governments and funding, but we would like to get to the place where we are actually our primary revenue source. And that is it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Your next event is going to be at Shirley Macy Park in 2016. 2017, you're hoping to be on a farm,
That is true.
and I would think that timing makes it suitable for the next intake of the community investment program. So that would be where I would expect to see this next. Councillor Lutz.
I believe there's timelines though around your application to the ALR. That means you need that information from us sooner.
Yeah, the application for the ALC can take up to 6 months. So I would just appeal to, you know, kind of that timeline, and we do need to move ahead with that application. Unfortunately, they're kind of like this, they're a bit hand in hand. You can't really make a application to the province without already having support of your, obviously, local government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is this a one-time incident where you want some relief financially? Or are we going to be looking at this year after year after year?
Specifically in terms of the application fee for the temporary usage permit?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to apply for a temporary usage permit every year? Yeah.
If it's a temporary use, then it's precisely a temporary use. Now, whether that's the ALR or ourselves, but if it's a temporary use for zoning within the district of Sechelt, it's not a lifetime use, it's a temporary use, 3 days.
Right.
And next time you'd have to apply again.
Okay.
And that's the whole point. And I think there's a limit on temporary use of three extensions.
Yeah.
So you might want to think seriously through that, because zoning is protected for a number of reasons. And if it's going to be an ongoing use, you'll want to try and make sure it's in a conforming zone for 5 years or 10 years out, as opposed to just the first 3.
Okay.
And I'm sorry that hasn't come up before. It should
Me
have.
too. And what would the appropriate zoning be?
I'm not the right one to ask, but staff would be able to deal with that tomorrow, I'm sure. Yeah.
So the answer to your question is right now would be yes. I mean, to help us get kind of like, you know, on our feet to be able to move forward. I would probably still apply for additional like grant and aid funding and stuff like that for the event itself in the future as an event.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, one more. Yeah.
What I'm really trying to get at is how many years down the road before you will be self-sufficient and you won't have to come to us for the $1,000? Are we looking at 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
I see 1 year for the temporary usage permit, but you know, like every other event that probably takes place in the Sunshine Coast, we all depend on local funding and financial support to get these off the go. I mean, we don't plan on going anywhere.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a dilemma for us in the sense that we're very supportive of arts and culture. We think it's a signature part of the identity of the Sunshine Coast and certainly of Sechelt for the future, and it's part of a new economy that I think we need to build. On the other hand, one of our really core principles and values for distribution and assessment of taxpayer funding is that we see things always in conjunction and in relative to others, and we don't actually deal with one-off requests because you can't compare there was well over 75 requests in our last intake program, and then you're coming in 3 months after that.
Right.
What about those 35 that we said no to? we can't compare them to you, and so we really like to get things for equity purposes all at the same time so we can compare them, make sure we're doing the best distribution for the taxpayers. Having said that, I know we're very sympathetic to the arts in the long term, so I'm sure staff will be able to help you bring this forward in some way. We don't make decisions on delegations in the council meeting, so
Okay.
I can't do that. Question about the permit?
Question about the permit?
Sure.
If I may.
Yep.
I'm,
And then we'll finish it
I'll
up.
be very quick. I'm attached to the farm property
Yep.
that this festival will be happening on. I just want to understand, so you were saying that in order to have this 3-day festival every year on the hayfield after we get the hay off, we've already farmed it and now we want to have a festival for 3 days and hay it again next year.
That's right.
We have to apply and pay the district $1,000 every year
If
in
that's what,
perpetuity to do this?
if that's what the permit fees are, and maybe we could look at the
And are we
permit fees.
sure it's the correct permit? We're not building structures, we're not doing anything except setting up tents and then taking them down.
I don't want to argue with you, but you're
No, I'm
changing
curious
the
because
use
I
from
just-
farm
I'm
use
curious.
to
Yeah.
public assembly. So it's going to a public assembly use, which is a fundamentally different zone. So there may be some way of rezoning your entire property.
That's not gonna happen.
Well,
It's a 200-acre farm, we're not
Well,
rezoning it.
or a hayfield, I don't know. But there's a number of possibilities that people could think through, but not us and not tonight.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
I can call you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Moving on to item 4 on our agenda, we have one proclamation, which is National Volunteer Week. And I'll be fairly quick, whereas 12.7 million Canadian volunteers give their time to help others, contributing close to 2 billion volunteer hours per year. And whereas volunteers in Sechelt are the lifeblood of a wide variety of services, from library operations to sports programs, from food bank and emergency housing services to support for local festivals, as we just heard, and events. And Sechelt's volunteers come from a range of ages and backgrounds. Whereas the collective result of the work done by community volunteers is that Sechelt is a more desirable place to live. Now, therefore, I, Bruce Milne, Mayor, do hereby proclaim April 10th to the 16th, 2016 as National Volunteer Week in the District of Sechelt. And item 5, adoption of the minutes of the previous council meetings. The first is adoption of the minutes of Wednesday, March 16th, 4 o'clock meeting. Motion to adopt is circulated. Councillor Wright and Seegers, all those in favor? That's carried. And we have minutes of the 7 o'clock regular meeting of March 16th, which is pages 9 to 18 of our agenda. Motion to receive, Councillor Shanks and Seegers, all those in favor. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Hearing none, a motion to adopt, Councillor Shanks and Seegers. All those in favor of adoption? Those are adopted. Any business arising from those minutes? Oh, there was. Problem with a 457-page agenda that comes in several versions is that it's hard to keep track. I guess we'll leave that for now. Moving on to item 7, committee commission minutes and reports. First, a summary of recommendations for the Planning Community Development Committee. Any of those we'd like to Yes, yeah, Councillor Inkster.
So just in reference to...
Turn it on and get, okay.
So just in reference to the previous presentation and the waiving of the fee, that is a fee for 2017?
Yes.
Just to be clear. So
But the
next year-
application has to start much sooner, and because it's for a temporary use permit and they need permission from the ALR Commission.
So it's for the $800 forgiveness, I guess we'll call it, is for next summer, most likely. Yeah. Okay, 2017
Yes, yeah,
summer.
it could come out of a different, that's when the event would occur, but
Yes.
the waiving of the permit application fee would be in 2016 budget.
Okay.
If there's nothing to be taken out of that, somebody to recommend adoption of recommendations 1 through 9, Councillor Seegers? Question?
Yes, on page 21, under recommendation number 9, we were looking, the last part of it was that staff investigate options of providing an in-kind contribution, is what we were looking at having there, in lieu of waiving a portion of the temporary use permit application fee.
We'll take that as a clarification rather than an
Yeah, thank
amendment.
you.
But when we get to it, staff investigates options of providing a contribution in kind, comma, in lieu of waiving a portion of the temporary use. Motion to receive and adopt recommendations 1 through 9. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? That's carried. And we move then to the recommendations of Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee. And I would like to pull out recommendations 6 and 7 for special attention. Anything else that people have in, Councillor? Okay, a question?
I had a question on recommendation number 12.
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Number 13.
go ahead.
Okay, the question being, we want to change the time frame with respect to people to hook up from, I take it it's 1 to 2 years? Are those the people that currently are outstanding in terms of their hookups? The 200 people we're talking about?
So they'd be given another 2-year extension? No. This is for new arrivals when the collector pipe goes into a new area.
It's not the 200 that currently exist that haven't hooked up.
These properties have the sewer line for past 20 years. So we don't want to extend in the 2 years.
And even if this did apply to them, they're 18 years over.
Yes.
Right.
So it doesn't apply to them.
No, that's what
yeah.
I just wanted clarification on that. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Lutz, microphone.
My understanding on this recommendation was one part of the bylaw indicated 1 year and another part indicated 2. And we wanted them to agree, so therefore change it to 2.
Yeah, and this is a good example of a discussion we had this afternoon. It started with a simple question before we voted, but we're actually now doing far more. Staff. Thank you, Ms. Clausen.
There was 2 bylaws. There was a plumber bylaw and a sewer bylaw.
That's right.
One said 2 and one said 1.
Want them to be
And
consistent.
I think Darnelda recommended that they should be consistent.
Okay. So somebody to move recommendations 1 through 5 and 8 through 13. Councillor Seegers, seconded by Councillor Shanks. Any discussion of any of those? All those in favor? That's carried. And recommendations 6 and 7, I wanted to bring this out for 2 reasons. One, when I was reading through it, I was surprised that there was a financial decision made in the Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee that rather than the Finance Committee, because all of council is at the Finance Committee and we can consider those decisions in lieu of a broader range of issues. And secondly, because a committee, the Parks Committee, is recommending that staff amend the 2016-2020 financial plan on the day that it's coming forward for second reading. In terms of process, I'm not happy. and I hope others aren't either. So really, this should have been a reference from the Parks Committee recommending to the Finance Committee. And then at Finance, we could have discussed whether or not we wanted to amend the bylaw or not, and consider that. So now we have two items. Recommendation 6, which is a recommendation to reroute the cost, but council and 3 of the council have not had any discussion about what it means to amend the bylaw and where that would impact it in terms of tax requisitions or finding other operational costs or whether something else is going to be cut. All of those discussions that we need to have before we simply amend our financial bylaw. So I'd like to maybe do these one at a time. Recommendation number 6, which is approval of the reroute. But if you're also directing staff to complete the project, maybe some advice from staff, either finance or CAO, when we have such a clear direction from a committee to spend money and get it done in the spring of 2016. That's even before the budget's adopted. Isn't this kind of out of order?
Your Worship, I would agree that as far as planning cycles, it is problematic and creates some challenges. It certainly caught my attention both on the budget process and an ambitious timeline. So on both of those accounts, it is challenging, and certainly as we move ahead on looking at financial impacts on the 2017 budget financial plan, that we need to be well in advance rather than last minute, as is in the case here.
Okay, what I would like to do is have somebody move recommendation number 6 so I can hear from those supporting this why it's a good idea to do the reroute and complete the project, and then we'll look at number 7 in terms of a direction to staff on the financial plan. So somebody move recommendation 6, Councillor Inkster, Councillor Wright. And before I ask, could somebody explain why this is a good and important thing to do for those councillors who are not on the Public Works Committee?
As the chair that adjudicated this meeting, I wanted to start with the indication that the staff was present, a number of staff members were present, and it was the interim chief financial officer was asked how we would make the amendment to the financial plan. Questions were asked how we would move forward with that. The particular project itself has some pieces that are not clearly in here, and what that mentions is that there was, I'm trying to make sure that I don't speak out of turn, that there was an amount that was going to be redirected from a study on that particular route that would take a substantial portion of this needed amount away, and then the other piece, I think half the amount would need to come from the, there would have to be an amendment to the budget to do that. The explanation given was that they were able to find some savings in not completing the study in the area, that they were going to reroute the trail, that there was a community need for the redirection of the trail, community use, and that there was a community, in a sense, community loss of not being able to do the trail. So that if they could do it in the springs, early summer, I think the timeline on from begin to end of completion is 3 to 5 days. So if in fact it was approved, the trail would be open all the way up the one side to connect from Mission Point Park all the way up the creek. Many people use it, many people that aren't from Sechelt, that it would be ready for the summer season. So there was a creative way for staff to, and they had originally thought that the amount that would be required to do it was within the study amount, but what they found was it would cost a little more. I'm not sure if in fact the discussion may occur with parks where maybe they can find it within their operating budget to cover the rest. We don't know that because the discussion hasn't occurred and maybe it can come from somewhere else, but perhaps that could be part of an additional recommendation, although it's constraining, but it gets that particular trail an important, because if that trail isn't rebuilt, there's no connectivity from Lower Chapman and or Mission Point Park to the upper area that continues all the way through to, I think, Selma Park Road and continues on. So that's the beginning of the trail.
Okay, thank you. And do other councillors have enough information to vote on the number 6 recommendation, the Chapman Trail reroute? If I'm going to call the question, all those in favor? None opposed, that's carried. Recommendation 7 regarding the amendment of the 2016-2020 financial plan. Somebody to move that? Councillor Seegers and Councillor Lutz. And could I ask our financial officer what happened in this process?
So my understanding is that this project came in late 2014. We noticed that there was erosion in the trail. Late 2014. There was an erosion then, and I think it just escalated. We saw the cracks in the trail, and now it's fallen into the creek. So in the 2015 budget, we had about $10,000 in to do a study, and we spent about $3,000 of that. So we had $7,000 left over. Now we have almost an emergency where the trail doesn't exist anymore because it's fallen into the river. And before I could have a read of the report, Perry suggested that perhaps we use an emergency fund, and we don't have an emergency fund for trail erosion. So we suggested that we could put it in the budget between second and third reading, if that's what the council wishes. However, the funding of that would have to come from general reserves.
Okay, so it's not in the budget that we have in front of
The
us.
additional $13,000 is not in the budget.
But when we get there, we could allocate it.
If you like.
Okay.
Councillor Inkster's suggestion to take it from operating is not really an option, as it is more of a capital expenditure and not an operating expenditure. Is building a new trail. It is not maintaining a trail.
Okay. I think we have enough information on this, and we'll actually have to deal with it when we come back to the budget later. But at the moment, just to get council's early thoughts on how we're going to go, all those in favor of amending the financial plan to include these? Councillors, any opposed? That's carried for now. Thank you for taking me through that. Moving on to bylaws, item 8, and the first discussion at council of the zoning amendment bylaw number 25271 for the SSC Properties Limited. And make sure I get all of these in the right place. Pages 26 to 160. First, motion to receive the report. Councillor Lutz and Shanks, all those in favor? That's carried. And recommendation number 2, we may as well receive the February 19th, 2016 staff report. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright, all those in favor? So we have the material in front of us. I ask, is staff thinking of speaking to this multiple reports and major events, or do you want to just wade into it for us? I'll give you a chance.
Well, very briefly, Mayor and Council, the report reviews the SSC development proposal information, staff recommendations of the Planning and Development Committee meeting, and to consider giving first reading and referral to public hearing. And it should also note that when the Planning and Community Development Committee considered this matter. They pulled two recommendations from the report regarding the expansion of the urban containment boundary be referred to council, and that connection to the district sewer system and contribute towards the increase in system capacity also be pulled from the report and referred to council.
Now, item 3 is that council consider the February 24th, 2016 recommendations of the Planning and Community Development Committee. And I want to make sure that we do this in the right order, because so that, I think, means we would turn to page 28 and look at those recommendations as they came through, deal with them one by one, and then come back to item 4 and 5. Is that the procedure that people would like to undertake? Because we have to consider the February 24th, 2016 recommendations. So moving then to page 28, we've already received the report, that's 6.1. Recommendation number 5, that staff be directed to prepare an official community plan amendment in support of the application that removes or replaces references to Silverback. That's been carried by the committee but not dealt with by council. So a motion for council to adopt. Councillor Seegers, thanks. Councillor to second that one. Councillor Mueller, thanks. Any discussion that we prepare an official community plan bylaw amendment in support of the application that removes or replaces all references to Silverback? Seems pretty straightforward. All those in favor? That's carried, good. Okay. Next recommendation, number 6, was that staff be directed to prepare an official community plan bylaw amendment in support of the application that expands the urban containment boundary to include, and that recommendation number 7 is that the expansion of the urban containment boundary be referred to council. So let's go to recommendation 7 first, moved so we can just adopt the recommendations of the committee. Somebody to move recommendation 7 on page 29. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? That's carried. So just to get our order right. Now we're looking at recommendation number 6 regarding the urban containment boundary. And the report on that is contained on pages 39 through 41 and more or less 42 and later. Page 43 through to 44 will give us the report for discussion purposes. We have it on the floor? Did I? No? Okay, somebody to move recommendation number 6. Councillor Seegers, second to get it on the floor. Councillor Wright, all those in favor? No, just a minute. We've got it on the floor. It's moved and seconded. Now, I want some discussion. Who would like to start? I'm glad to finish, but who would like? Councillor Mueller.
Mr. Mayor, I just would like to be clear then what discussion will be taking place when this comes up, item 10.10. This is occurring now.
Yeah, just let me urban containment boundaries discussion 10.10, report to be distributed. Is there an additional report? There is no additional report. That should have been deleted, that item. And that discussion will take place now in practice on a real piece as opposed to theoretical. So I think we should have deleted 10.10 at the beginning. But We weren't aware of that. Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Mueller. And again, you have the floor.
I just wanted to be clear on that in case I'm the only one confused. I assume that the urban containment boundary discussion would be happening separate from this process and that there would be a report. So if that's all news to me only.
There was a report and discussion of the urban containment boundary for this property that came through the planning committee. And that is included in our agenda packages. That's the one I was referring to in pages 40 through to 44 or so. But there's not a separate discussion paper on the urban containment boundary for item 10.10, which would have been a more general discussion of urban. Mr. Palmer.
I sense just a little bit of confusion. I just clarify, so there's a motion on the table. That's the recommendation number 6.
Yes.
Just a note that at the committee level that recommendation was defeated. It's on the following page where it shows that it was defeated.
Oh, I see. But then the very next one was that it was carried to refer it to this council. So it's in front of us now as recommendation 7. And we still have to deal with it if it's come to us to be referred to us. Is that correct? Okay. Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. The committee actually defeated the decision on urban containment. Any discussion of the recommendation now, which would direct staff to include these properties in the urban containment boundary? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I've done a lot of reading over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
OCP, Liquid Waste Management Plan, wastewater, what was the other one? Yeah, wastewater strategy, the wastewater strategy final report, OCP, as I said. What I found was in the OCP, it talks on page 93 that under long-term planning for sanitary sewer, we would follow the Stage 2 liquid waste management plan. That guides our long-term planning for sewage collection and treatment. So I had to go back and read that whole report. In the year 2000, so I've kind of put a bit of a timeline together here. In the year 2000, the liquid waste management plan was approved. That was actually under Mayor Bruce Milne and Councillor Darren Inkster. And option 2E was the one that was the community actually selected. And 2E indicated that outlying areas that have been potentially designated for urban density development be serviced by local community collection, treatment, and reuse disposal systems, except for the terraces development in Sandy Hook, which is to be serviced by an extended municipal system. So that's what the liquid waste management plan is that is actually referenced in our OCP. Then that option 2E was referenced and approved in the wastewater strategy final report in August 2005 under Councillors Mike Shanks and Darren Inkster. And the official community plan adopted by Council in 2011 under Mayor Darren Inkster and Councillor Alice Lutz also references this liquid waste management plan. So in the OCP, it says that the urban containment boundary is not, sewer will be extended to areas in generally extended to areas in the urban containment boundary. And I'm assuming that that was because even though the Silverback or Terraces or whatever SSC, whatever name you want to call it, was not in the urban containment boundary, it actually, under the liquid waste management plan, indicated that sewer was to go there, was to be extended to that. So our OCP says sewer is to go to that area. So I'm in support of following what our OCP says based on our liquid waste management plan.
I'm hearing another long-term councillor saying except. Yes, there's a lot more information involved in the trials and tribulations of that particular property from 1994, when it was first proposed as the terraces, through to 1999, when it was approved as the terraces, the 2000 Liquid Waste Management Plan, complete rethinking as the silverback and changes to the OCP and amendments to the OCP. And that's what we have to take into account, is the amendments that have taken place at various times. And a liquid waste management plan, which I think we need to revisit and renew, but the person sitting here before me said was dead. So I'm not sure if it's dead or what, but it has to be revived and it has to be looked at. And we need to actually know what the liquid waste management plan says, especially after the urban containment or the urban services report earlier today. That was like a bombshell in terms of planning this far out. So I hear one councillor saying the OCP supports extending sewer to this, whether it's in or out of the urban containment boundary. Any other discussion at this point? Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, I think the reality further along the timeline in 2008 when Silverback was approved, Silverback was still outside the urban containment boundary, but the wastewater treatment plant was to be constructed on Dusty Road at that time. And then in 2010, the issue or the thought of urban containment boundaries came into effect, which once again put that piece of property outside the urban containment boundaries for primary growth and secondary growth.
Yeah, we didn't have an urban containment boundary in the year 2000.
No,
That's
what I'm saying.
Sustainability plans that brought that forward. I think there's two issues here. There's one in general about sewage collection and disposal for a new development, and there's the urban containment boundary, and then there's the property rezoning itself. My sense of this is that there's a lot of misinformation on the sewer use, and I'm just going to try and point to a couple of things in this report. There's been quite a bit of discussion about the fact that Trail Bay, Porpoise Bay does not flush well, and therefore it wouldn't be good to have an outfall in that area. I would like to ask staff if they're aware of the standards of sewer treatment that are referenced in the 2000 Liquid Waste Management Plan that Councillor Seegers has referenced, if they know what standards were expected back then or not. Sanath.
I need to go and look at that, what strategy that time,
Yeah.
and report back.
Yeah, thank you. And the second question to staff would be whether they're aware of the standards that are outlined in the 2011 Sustainability Plan for sewage treatment and collection. I don't think these are unreasonable questions to ask when we're looking at what is probably the most significant development facing Sechelt. And both of those documents call for treatment at the highest standards. And the reason I'm raising that is that in the report that staff brought forward, they made a reference to outfalls and a package plant and things that simply wouldn't happen. They wouldn't happen. And even if people weren't aware of the Liquid Waste Management Plan standards and the Sustainability Plan standards, I think everybody in this community is aware of the practical standards put in place with the new wastewater resource center, which are basically the highest standards in land. And apparently, water as clear as this comes out of one end of it and goes to Trail Bay. And I'm not sure if it would make a big difference to Trail Bay or Porpoise Bay if this glass of water was tossed into one side or the other. So what I'm suggesting is that the implications that in any way Porpoise Bay would be polluted don't stand up to our own planning documents and don't stand up to the standards that Sechelt has set and don't stand up to what this council would insist on. So I don't think it's an issue at all. Anything that occurs for sewage treatment in Sechelt now has had a standard set, which is of the highest standard, and that's what's going to happen. And if we've found that disposal into Porpoise Bay was inappropriate, it would simply mean that land-based or alternate disposal would have to be arranged. And that could be many things other than hooking a sewer pipe down to ebb tide. It could in fact be a small reuse water pipe, 6 to 8 inch water pipe, sending well-treated effluent down to ebb tide as easily as a large and impractical sewer pipe. So I think we need to think through what the options are as opposed to assuming that it's either connect with ebb tide or pollute Porpoise Bay. That's not the option. Those are not the alternatives at all. Councillor Inkster.
I think you've got me.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Lutz was first.
And I wanted to speak about the urban containment and the fact that looking back to the 90s with the information that Councillor Seegers is talking about is all well and good, but there are different parts of our community that have been waiting beyond the 90s, back into the 80s, right to 86, our 30th anniversary coming up. And I think we have to look at servicing those agreements first. We're hearing from the report we got tonight from Urban Systems that the capacity isn't there now. And we need to use that in a just and fair manner, what is left, before we start changing our urban containment, throwing out the OCP density issues around downtown Sechelt. So it just isn't there for me.
It's a complicated issue. So just Councillor Inkster is next.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we all know that follow Sechelt's history, there was a number of commitments made when Sechelt became the district of Sechelt as opposed to the village in a number of areas to service those areas. It was a key piece to that agreement that occurred in order to bring in those outlying areas was to give those areas sewage treatment. I mean, that's a really important piece of the growth of a community is having a safe, healthy way to treat one's sewage and to move it away from your area. Additionally, the commitments made to those areas and the capacity issues brought up earlier tonight, and the fact that the number of the arguments that are being made by some members of the community, it's a strange argument because on one hand they're applauding the individuals involved in this development and how professional they are and how much expertise they have, and then on the other hand they're suggesting that they would produce a sewage system that would dump low standards of effluent into the inlet. I mean, these people we know they're professionals. They've indicated that. There's support for them doing that. The proponents of this have some good ideas. And I think that we know that they'll be innovative.
Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, I think what's important to me is what's transpired over a period of time with respect to eliciting input from various organizations such as the Advisory Planning Committee, East Porpoise Bay Ratepayers Association, and a variety of others. And it's somewhat unfortunate that in our last report, the worst case scenario was put out there, which would in fact be a plant in that specific area that was sending its effluent out into Porpoise Bay, when the reality says that there are in fact other options. And through extensive reading over the last few days, I'm surprised that time and again it gets quoted that in reality there is currently sufficient capacity for hookup. Current capacity means this period in time, right now. It doesn't account for the fact that there are obligations that have been made over the years to those people that are within an urban containment boundary. And we have to, in my opinion, we have to look after those interests as well as addressing what's trying to happen on SSC property.
Further discussion, Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. In all of the information I've read on the SSC properties, they've indicated they're not leaning towards one option or the other, right? They'll put a treatment plant on the facility, or they'll connect whatever council directs that they do. One of my concerns is, well, I have two concerns. One is our OCP actually indicates Stage 2 liquid waste management plan guides long-term planning for sewage collection and treatment. So if that's what it says in our OCP, does that mean that we then require an amendment to our OCP to not have them connect, given that that's what our OCP says? So that's one. And the other is, we talk about Selma Park and Davis Bay. In the 2005 wastewater strategy final report, it indicates that to do the collection, not for treatment, but just for the collection, would be $16.4 million in 2005. And I don't see that information or any of that planning has been done in our budgeting to have that money to do that. So we're saying at this point, we're not going to connect SSC because we want to save the capacity for this other area, which we haven't done any planning for. So how do we reconcile all of those pieces going forward? Another piece that in the documents that were requested by Councillor Shanks with regards to Silverback, it indicated that in those development documents, if they wanted to connect, they had to pay for the connection. They also had to pay for the extra capacity. So if we're looking at connecting SSC, they would have to come forward with those funds in some manner so that the capacity would not be used that we would be using for the other areas. So all of those pieces need to be weighed in and looked at to see if we can come up with something that works for all of this.
I agree that the capacity issue or the lack of work on Selma Park and Davis Bay has been one of it wasn't projected to be done until 2020, I think, but there has been very little or no work whatsoever, but that would be paid for by those communities when it went forward. And the Silverback one was interesting because they did indicate an $8 million contribution for sewer services, but it didn't outline whether it would be a connection and additional capacity or whether the capacity would be built somewhere else. But all of that was done in the context of shutting down ebb tide and expanding Dusty Road. That was the point. And that world doesn't even exist anymore. The world has changed. What concerns me the most is that we actually don't know much about where we're going. We heard a report today that gave us one scenario. On page 44 of our agenda, we have staff telling us that the existing plant can serve another 8,000 additional people above and beyond the 2015 use. I don't think that's even close to accurate. It's probably out by 25 to 30% from what Urban Systems told us this evening. So given that lack of sense of accuracy about where we are with the plant, I don't think we should be taking the chance of loading additional capacity onto it. The other real resistance to this is people are throwing around the word expansion as if it's a pretty simple thing to do. And I can tell you from where I sit that politically speaking, expanding that plant on the current lot isn't going to happen. There is no support. The community would be... Do people have such short memories that they don't remember the community uproar in 2013? Can you not remember a referendum that was going to save us interest rates of over 1% and $1 million grant, and it was almost turned down because of the anger in the community? There is just no support for simply expanding that plant. It's not a simple, oh yeah, we can just do it. It sounds easy in theory, but when you stop to think about what it would take politically and in terms of capital and infrastructure to actually expand the plant, and then you would end up with, well, if you've been to the back of the plant, you know it's a 40 to 50 foot wall. That wall would now be out right beside the residential areas. It wouldn't have anything like the park area that we're trying to work with. So I think there's some real reality checks we need to give ourselves about when we talk about expansion. The technology we have today, I think, behooves us to think of satellite plants. I expect that Davis Bay, Wilson Creek will be served by a small plant, probably very similar to what we need in East Porpoise Bay. And the only left parts that will be hooking up to the current plant will be Havies Road, gravity fed south through Selma Park, and the rest of the primary growth area, which is West Sechelt. But in order to figure that out, we need a liquid waste management plan, not one that's been declared dead, not one that we sort of pull out from the year 2000, which was almost another century, if not another millennium. And I was there, I wrote it, I was involved. There's people in the room who sat through those liquid waste management meetings. They went on for about 2 years, three years. But we don't need a 3 years planning session, but we do need 6 to 8 months of thinking through our liquid waste issues as an entire group and thinking of the entire district as a whole. And if in that planning stage it said, the smartest thing to do is run a pipe through East Porpoise Bay and connect with East Porpoise Bay in this development, I would be okay with that if it was measured and balanced within a context overall. But tonight, I don't think we have the information to know what hooking it up would mean and what the capacity would mean. So I'm going to recommend that we resist the urge to put this in the urban containment boundary. We continue to maintain the highest standards for sewage treatment, which any community that calls itself sustainable will do, and I'm sure the Sechelt sustainable communities will as well. And that we move on to looking at the rest of the rezoning unless there's further discussion by councillors. And it's 8:30. I said I'd take a break at 8:30. Let's look for a vote. Councillor Seegers?
So what I'm hearing you say is that even though the current OCP says that it's to be connected, you're suggesting we not connect it at this time?
I think that the reading of the OCP is a little bit like the earlier reading of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms we heard earlier today. Not exactly on target. And in fact, I didn't want to get into an argument on that, but I said earlier today, a lot of us have got to learn not to practice law without a license. I think the OCP is more nuanced and is not actually insisting that we follow through on the year 2000 liquid waste management plan. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll be glad to go through the plan. We have a motion on the floor, and if there's no further discussion, we'll call the question and ask all those. Now, let's make sure we know what it is. Staff be directed to prepare an official community plan bylaw amendment in support of the application that expands the urban containment boundary to include the following properties. All those in favor of that motion? And all those opposed to that motion? That's defeated. Does anybody want their motion recorded? Now, according to our procedures bylaw, which we're going to change, you can only ask for your vote to be recorded if it's in the negative. But we'll record the dissenting vote in this case. I want to take a break. I know that we've still got lots to do here, and I want council to have a chance to stretch themselves for no more than 5 minutes. It's 20 to 9 now, and we'll come back and do the rest of the rezoning issues. 5 minutes. Well, we can go upstairs, maybe. Yeah, there's one up there. Except I'm going to have to go at 9:30, not now. This next, stuff is just as problematic.
Yeah. Now, especially now.
You know? So the final adoption be conditional, and then we go through all of those things of what it's supposed to be conditional on. And you've circled a lot of the same ones as me. 24 acres, 27 acres, does it add up or does it not add up? What does it mean?
Okay.
Okay. If we can get this show back on the road. And I know it's not very seldom you get to see your neighbors and your friends and community things, but when this is over, you can all go to some close by pub. Thank you very much. Yes, there's a few more seats available. You can find better places to sit and watch the action. We still have a fair chunk to do on this issue alone, and then of course there's lots to follow on the agenda, so it's still going to be a complicated one. So what we're going to be doing now is looking through the other recommendations, starting with recommendation 8, which is page 29 of the Planning Committee, and it's a very long one. And what I'm going to do is have the recommendation moved and seconded, and then take us through items 3, 4, and that long set of provisions, so we actually know what is going on there. So, Council, we're on page 29 of the overall agenda. Recommendation number 8 from the Planning Committee is that staff be directed to prepare a zoning bylaw in support of application of the following subject properties, provided roof heights and buildings. So that one, we're all on the same page. And it will continue to item 4, right through to page, I think, 32, the bottom, provision of archaeological preliminary field report for all the subject lands and incorporation, so everything in between there. Can I have somebody make that motion? Councillor Seegers, Councillor Lutz. Now, discussion. I think it's probably best to try and go through sections of it. So let's start with section 3, that staff be directed, and that's the one that subject properties provided roof heights and building massing are limited to 6 stories above grade with 2 to 3 story building heights along the waterfront, neighboring lands, and district road right-of-ways. So perhaps the best thing would be to ask staff, what does it really mean when we say that roof heights and building will be limited to 6 stories? Is that on all of these properties? All of these properties could have 6-story buildings or not?
Mayor and Council, no. The higher buildings are at the key 1 and key 2, but otherwise they're all generally 2 and 3-story buildings throughout in the neighborhood zones.
So is there a reason why that motion or that part of the motion wasn't structured so it said that limited to 6 stories on specific lots, or as opposed to sort of a general that?
We didn't have the level of information that we had in preparing the bylaw at that time.
Okay. And will this be a loophole then? Will this actually make it possible for 6 stories to go all the way through?
No. The new zoning bylaw, 271, reflects these resolutions.
Okay. And we'll get to that.
And there are some fairly confusing height calculations in some of the buildings where 50% of a building can be a certain height and 50% is a lower height.
Yeah, I think I understood that. Any further discussion of section 3, which is page 29? Councillors, and it's up on the screen. Councillors understand and prepared to think through that one? I think I should ask for those in support of that section, because then it's going to be more complicated as we move on to different sections. If you don't mind, I'll break up these. I'll just call the question on that. All those in favor of section 3 as Councillor Seegers, any opposed? I think that's carried. And now let's look at the one that says, "And final adoption of the bylaws be conditional upon." And A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and then a whole bunch under I. I'd like to say at the start, it would have been easier for me to follow if all of the items to do with parks and agricultural land and green space and riparian zones were consolidated in the sense of one after another or all in the same place, so that when we get to section I, items 4, 3, 4, 8, 12, 13, and 43 all give us different parts of this elephant, and we can't really see what it is. So we start with item 4A, 24 hectares of parkland, which includes the entire 5% of statutory requirement. And does that include the waterfront park as part of that 24?
Yeah. And the waterfront park is the time and commit public access in perpetuity to the waterfront park. So we're getting the whole waterfront, but we're getting it as a statutory right away.
That will be different than other park zoning in the area, which would not be a stat.
Yes, in fact, I think we're taking the waterfront as primarily park, but then we're taking a statutory right away for access from the development to the Porpoise Bay.
To ensure there's always access to the waterfront through that. All right. Any questions among councillors on items 4A, B, or C? Councillor Seegers.
Through you to staff, these recommendations were what was brought forward to the planning committee.
Yes.
Is this actually what we're going to be considering in the zoning bylaw? I believe there were changes made, were there not, before the zoning bylaw that we're going to be considering tonight?
These are primarily outside of the zoning bylaw, but these are the ones, and the only other one that the planning committee removed for separate consideration is item 27.
Okay, thank you.
The planning committee didn't remove all of this?
Yes, but they took out.
Oh, section 27, which is done. We'll get to later. Okay. Any other discussion before we move on to item D, 4D? Is 4A, B, and C? Councillor Lutz? Okay. Item D caused some confusion for me, and again, some of these questions are because the planning committee went through it, but 3 of councillors aren't on this, so it's the first time council has seen this. The provision of a revised traffic impact study and the incorporation of its infrastructure improvement recommendations into the development agreement. Why is that waiting until final adoption as opposed to first reading and public hearing? And the reason I'm asking that is, in my experience, developers do various numbers of studies, geological, traffic, water, various impact studies. They're never uncontested. It's not as if somebody does a study and then all of the improvement recommendations are embraced by either staff, council, or the developer. In fact, they're usually contested, discussed, debated, and renegotiated. So whether or not the entire Sechelt Inlet Road should or should not be improved as it was for Silverback, or whatever it might be, I'm just concerned about leaving this to what you say is basically a technical study that will come up with some recommendations, and apparently they will be satisfactory to the developer and to the council and to staff. And I've never seen one of those studies yet that wasn't part of a negotiated settlement. Mm. So if it's a negotiated settlement, it means we don't know what it is, which means we can't wait till adoption. We actually have to do that negotiation to see the impacts as we're approving the zoning. And so am I missing something?
Essentially, we put all of these as a condition of adoption to ensure that they were all satisfied or a conclusion was agreed to before consideration of 4.3. But if council would like to move some up further, to have that information, for example, available at a public hearing, council can do so.
Is it out of the ordinary? I mean, I have some experience, but I'm absolutely willing to say that some of my experience is now dated back to another century. So I'll look to the rest of councillors too in terms of their experience and what they would, when they would want to see. And that's not the only study. But anything else on D that other councillors would like to talk about in terms of the traffic impact study, when we should see it, and whether it will have, whether it can wait until final adoption? Councillor Lutz.
Are you looking for a motion to move that traffic impact study to come to council prior to public hearing?
I wasn't actually there yet. I was just trying to see what other councillors were thinking about it and discussion. So if other councillors are satisfied that we can wait and at adoption we can figure these things out, I'm actually quite willing to take the direction of council on this. I'm just raising questions that I'm not sure about. And I'm wondering how others are and what I mean, there's a lot of experience on the table, some of it more recent than mine. Councillor Seegers.
It's kind of a chicken and egg sort of thing. If we approve the zoning, and take it to a stage where the developer has some comfort that it's going to go forward, then they typically are more willing to invest the money into the studies. If they don't have that comfort from us, they can be putting a lot of money into doing all of the studies, which we won't support around the zoning, and then so the studies are, useless, and they'd have to put out the money again. So it's kind of, in what order do you do this to ensure that it all kind of moves forward? I understand your concern, and that, some of these are going to be decision-making points for the public and for council. Where do they happen along the continuum? It's kind of hard to say one way or another.
So there was a traffic study done for the terraces and for Silverback. And in a sense, we have a sense of what they suggested. This is actually both timed differently, and I think will have a different population base than Silverback. And I suspect the world is changing enough that if it's designed well, the traffic impacts will actually be very different than Silverback. That's my sense. But I don't know what they are. And Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. From a negotiation point of view, the sooner that we insist on a traffic study, that puts us in a much better negotiation position, in my opinion. So I think the sooner that we ask for the traffic study, the better off we would be.
Okay, any other thoughts? Councillor Shanks?
So,
you've seen many of these.
Yeah, a couple. So in fact, that would include the whole paragraph, would it not?
Well, we would get the traffic study. That would inform us in terms of the public hearing and second reading, as I understand Councillor Wright thinking. And then we would know what needed to be negotiated into the development agreement. It may not be fully developed. I don't think we reach a development agreement that early, but you would know what you needed, and you would know what the conditions were that the community was saying, oh, that's actually quite benign, or it's not benign. So what I'm picking up, and I hope I'm not leading too much, because I actually am trying to get a sense of what council wants to do, and I don't know what you did at committee, but Councillor Lutz suggested that we ask for that to be done before public hearing, or a motion, and it sounded like Councillor Wright would support that as well. So let's put that as a motion from Councillor Lutz.
I'll make that motion.
To Councillor Wright. Any discussion of that? And the request is that the traffic impact study be done prior to public hearing. Any further discussion of that? Oh, yes. Thank you.
Through you to staff. Is that, at this stage, is that onerous? Is it on the developer? Is it information that's going to come forward? And, given the zoning, again, as I said, the zoning is going to determine the build out and all of that. Is it going to be something that will inform us properly going forward.
I think it would be useful information for the public hearing and for the public to consider at the hearing. And once we go to the hearing, really the zoning is set. It's been advertised. The public has a right to rely on the bylaw that's being made available. So I think it's reasonable.
Any further discussion? Councillor Wright?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Without jumping too far ahead, if you go to the bottom of page 32 and you go to item 44, it says, "And other amenity and or sustainability features identified by council of the District of Sechelt." So I guess what I'm asking for is something that could fall under item 44. I just happen to be asking for it at a different place in the agenda. It can't be that onerous, I wouldn't think, if they agreed to item 44.
Item 44 we'll get to. Maybe we'll take that off, do the developer a favor, take that one off. Any further discussion of the timing of the traffic impact study? All those in favor? That's carried. Item E, could you tell me what an SCRD Sustainable Travel Plan is? I've been on the SCRD board for a long time.
That was a recommendation of the SCRD. We haven't got the details of a sustainable travel plan, but they requested that that be included in the condition of approval.
Well, if they don't know what it is and we don't know what it is, then we can wait for that one until final adoption. You think so?
Yeah.
Transit?
No, I think it's
Councillor Inkster may have some inkling to what it is.
Yeah, I think the sustainable travel plan is an indication of how many people will be traveling from the development to work throughout the Sunshine Coast,
Okay.
and how many will be working and on site. And so, interestingly enough, when they did the study 5 years ago, the District of Sechelt has the most in-community travel and actually creates the least amount of GHG emissions on the Sunshine Coast of all the communities, based on the fact that the large number of the people that actually live here work here. So that's what that would be an indication of, that there would be people that work in the development.
Or we're all retired and don't work.
Or don't need to travel to work, sure. That's what that would be an indication
Okay,
of.
that's interesting.
Yes.
That can probably wait if it's more of an energy GHG thing. Councillor Seegers.
I think it actually goes beyond that. It looks at, how would people get around? So are they walking? Are they biking? Are they doing car shares, transit, all of that? It's how does that fit into a sustainable travel plan for that community?
Good. I'm hoping the traffic impact study will be sensitive enough to tell us that travel in 2020 is going to be different than it was in 2005, that it'll actually tell us those things, that this isn't about cars anymore, it's about work at home, it's about those things. Any other questions about E? F, the provision of a landslide assessment geotechnical report to meet DPA guidelines. This was another one that I thought was probably pretty important. Any other council thoughts on how important that is and when you want to know about it? Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, it's,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I would think that those are things we would want to know as well with respect to F and G. F more so, I would say, than G. But.
Yeah. Any other comments by Councillor Inkster?
So this just speaks to the sloping as in behind and as part of the development. That's what this would speak to.
No, I think it would be, geotechnical would be a little bit more than that. We'd want to look at slope, of course, but
Yes.
underground water. We'd want to be very comfortable that this is suitable for the zones that are being proposed. And when we get to the zoning, got a couple of questions about what plan, if it isn't suitable for what is proposed, what could go there or what is expected to go there in 10 years. Because the way it's laid out now, some of it won't be built out for 15 or 20 years. I think we should have a motion to ask for the geotechnical reports prior to public hearing as well. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lutz, Councillor Mueller.
Thank you, Worship. I was just curious if planning staff could maybe refresh our memory about the different types of geotechnical reports and specifically relating to bearing.
For bearing, we typically require a geotechnical report as a condition of issuance of building permit.
So this would be a more general?
Yeah, yes.
I think my question was for you to refresh us about the different types of assessments. This is one type of assessment. There may be others, so I'm just curious what the other ones are.
Those are the two primary geotechnical reports that we request, which is specific to a building site, and this would be a more general geotechnical assessment of the landslide.
We have a motion to ask for the geotechnical reports of F. Thank you, Councillor Lutz. Seconded by Councillor Shanks. Further discussion, Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. Are some of these reports done already?
Yeah, I think so.
Some have been updated, most have not. And so we're requesting that all the technical reports be updated, including geotechnical.
I think the public will expect that sensitivity to those ones in particular, given other situations. Environmental assessment of the lands. The lands have been looked at quite a bit, so we probably don't need that. Councillor? Oh, yes, sorry. On F, it was moved by, seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. G and H. Councillors happy with those and understand what they are? Councillor Lutz?
I'm not comfortable with the placement and the grouping of the affordable housing. I believe it's Foxwood Creek. It appears to me that it is just one neighborhood and it's all affordable housing. I find that I'm uncomfortable with that. I would like to see more of a mix of neighborhoods. That's one of the things I've learned over the last 7+ years, that a healthy, strong community is a mix, not ghettos of like kinds. And for that reason, I would like to see that looked at differently.
Okay.
Is that possible at this stage?
That's a little different than the issue of the covenants for affordable housing, but it can be an item to consider when we're looking at the zoning patterns for the different things, and if other councillors agree. And I think you might want to hear from the developer about what they have in mind for the different neighborhoods, because some of that small lot subdivision won't be necessarily affordable, right? So I think the mix will be there.
If council wants to look at some changes to the bylaw, we could go back and look at incorporate those changes between first and second, in which case be scheduling a public hearing after second.
Oh, can you do that? Okay, interesting. Okay. That was H. I is much more complicated. So let's try and run through that. Registration of development agreement that secures the following amenities and sustainability features. So we start with 24 hectares of park in 4A, And now in 4.1, we end up with an additional 10 hectares, which brings us to 34 hectares of park. And then we have item 4, 50% of the lands, 84.5 hectares, are reserved for public and park spaces. Agriculture includes riparian, etc. That links in with item 8, which is 27.05 hectares of land reserved for agriculture. I didn't know if the land reserved for agriculture included the community gardens or not. Community gardens are separate. So if I take the 84.5, which is reserved for all of these sort of spaces, take away the 34 hectares of park, we end up with 50, 27.5 are for agriculture, then there's about 22 hectares, which seem to be riparian setbacks, steep slopes, and things of that nature. Is that, and my question on the riparian setbacks, slopes, and on the agriculture, is that privately owned land?
It could be, but you can't build on the riparian areas, steep slopes. The agriculture will be divided into individual parcels, which will permit a dwelling on each.
On each one. So they're reserved for setbacks, but they could be in somebody's yard, somebody's lot, somebody's provision, or somebody's 2-acre lot or whatever.
We have not, a condition of adoption, which we'll get to, is that the initial subdivision plan is prepared concurrent. And so that would actually then define all of those areas as a condition of adoption in a subdivision plan.
Okay. And how does that fit with item 10, which is natural features made in public and incorporated into trail features? Would it not be the riparian slopes and the steep slopes that are part of the trail features? Wouldn't your trail be going along by the creek? So that wouldn't be privately owned, probably.
The multi-use trails would be dedicated, and where there were natural features, we'd want them incorporated into the trails as a feature.
Yeah. Okay. But there's no, okay. So that, I think, any other questions that others have on what's going on here? And 84.5 hectares is 50% of the lands, but that includes the agricultural, which actually be private property and subdivided. So that's something we want to think about as it comes forward, whether or not because this is all community amenity, apparently, but if it's not, this is to register a development agreement covenant that secures the following community amenities, but in fact, they're private. A lot of them are. They may be sustainability features, which is a good thing. I wanted to understand item 5 in 4.1 or 4I5, the construction and gifting of a public marine recreation facility for non-powered water recreation users and groups, such as for dinghy sailing, outrigger canoeing, rowing, canoeing, kayaking. I wondered if you could quantify that in any way, because that could be a very, very, very large structure so that 10,000 people in Sechelt could store their kayaks or paddle boards or surfers and dragging boats. Or it could, in fact, be a very small facility where there's one dinghy and a paddleboard.
But we haven't quantified it, but it is in between those two extremes. So it's it would accommodate the I'm not sure the actual name of the organization, but the Paddling and Canoeing Club and visitors. It would be large enough to accommodate the existing club.
The existing club?
And individuals joining or itinerants.
Mm-hmm. I'm asking these because the public's going to ask all the same questions when it gets to public hearing. Mm-hmm. And we want to know as well as we can what it is we're rezoning and approving. And I want council not to be able to defend it before a public hearing, but to be able to explain it as it goes into public hearing and to be able to defend it well if we accept it at second reading. Any other questions among councillors on anything in I1 through 5 or 6? 7 seems straightforward. 8. Councillor Inkster. Sorry, I'm pushing my buttons before you guys.
I guess I'm pushing your buttons. I wanted to ask a question further to the marine recreation. There's a piece there is that now where there's a piece utilized for an existing use and facility, a festival? Is that what you're referring to? And can you just go over that again, the description of what you envision it to look like in the end? I believe there's a piece there that touches on it would make sense to continue with that area that's closest to slopes down to the ocean. I think that's what the envisioning is. Yeah. So it's say that again though, it's a dock and a covered area or?
It hasn't been defined yet.
Okay.
We will be requiring to define it, but it is in the location where they were launching before. It's at the end of the spit.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a low area compared to the others.
Yes.
Okay, haven't defined it. Okay.
I'm a bit confused about not defining things and when we'll define them. And on the one hand, I guess depends how the public hearing goes. It might give us grounds to want to define them in larger ways, but I mean, it just seems a bit unusual to me. Provision of a multi-use bike path to connect to downtown Sechelt. Could you explain, does that mean more than one bike or to be used for things other than bikes? What's a multi-use bike path?
Multi-use, more than just biking.
Okay. Multi-use transport, active transportation, I think they call it. And item 12, protection of identified wildlife corridors, veteran trees, water bodies. Is that part of the item 4, 50% of the lands that are reserved, or is it something different?
In some cases, they do overlap, but we wanted to ensure that we caught everything. So some may be dedicated, some may be protected.
Okay. This is why I'd like to see all of those ones that are on a similar theme consolidated together, so we could sort of go through them and see what they were. Because I was reading along and I couldn't tell. And 13, see the same question above, dedication and protection of riparian areas. Has that already been mentioned? Is it the same as item 4? Is it new? This seemed to be a bit of a dog's breakfast, to tell you the truth. Item 14, any questions or thoughts? Now, item 15 is of some importance because it seems to be different than the OCP. So, develop on lands less than 30% grade. What happens between 20% and 30% grade? Maybe you should just leave your mic on. So.
Leave them both mics on. So this is recommending just 30% and less can be developed on, and any disturbed sites are restored.
Mm-hmm. But our OCP considers 20% as a steep slope, does it not?
I'd have to double check, but I do believe it does permit up to 30%.
It does permit it. I know it does, but and that's the part that I don't understand. I understand there can be some development on the land between 20 and 30%, but it's significantly constrained, and it has a number of constraints, and that doesn't. And I don't know if number 15 tells us that, or if it just says everything at 31% is constrained completely. But so we'll want to watch how that moves forward, and I expect us to hear more about that on the public hearing. The next one that I wonder if we need in advance, provide public realm spaces with universally accessible design. How many public realms? They're all marked out in the zoning bylaw. Do we know what they are?
It'll be with a development permit, but it'll primarily be the public plazas and the walkways to public plazas.
Because that makes a big difference, whether there's many or few. Stormwater management plan. How can they do that in advance? And that needs to be done.
Yes.
But you're happy to wait for that until adoption? You think it'd be done after second and third reading?
We were comfortable with it at adoption because as a condition of adoption is also having a full development permit drawings. So they will have taken the site planning to a development plan level of detail.
Okay, my next question was on 21, commitment to connect fiber optic network and Wi-Fi in public spaces. Is this a single provider, and who actually pays for that over time? Would the developer actually be in an agreement to maintain Wi-Fi in that area, or
Or
would
the
it
strata.
turn it over? Or the strata, or a strata?
Yeah.
So, but the public spaces, okay, I don't understand that. So there would be a residual strata in some parts of the zone.
This is what we are requesting.
Okay. And who would that be? Would that be a consortium of local private landowners and that share common property?
Yeah, we would deal with that at time of subdivision. Or as a condition of subdivision.
Or as a condition, okay. So who's going to pay for the they'll provide the fiber optic, but the Wi-Fi, and who'll pay for it? We'll wait. Climate change, flood and landslide mitigation. My note beside that is tell us what's going to be done, because if there's anything that's important over there, it's landslide mitigation. So I think we need to know what that is, not just a promise that they'll do it. Number 23, percentage of overall energy use from on-site renewable energy or rapidly renewable carbon fuels. And by that, I've got 1% and a question mark. Like, am I the only one who thinks that's almost a meaningless, like, I don't understand that. I really don't.
A number of these are items that we flagged for negotiation as a condition of adoption. Yeah. And at this point, we hadn't identified a number. We'll just see how far we can push it. But we do want some on-site renewable energy generation.
Yeah, but when we take this to public hearing, and let's think this one through. This is a really important project for all sorts of reasons. It has already started in 1994, that property in various sites, which gives us a good 20 years, 22. It's going to be built out over another 20, 25 years, so it's like already a 50-year project. When people, and there's support for it in the community, pockets of strong support, most of them kind of expected, and there are pockets of resistance. And when we build support for this, or council comes around, one of the things we'll want to know is, oh, this has a high percentage of energy use from on-site renewables, or one. I mean, it makes a real difference, really makes a difference.
Perhaps if council, as we go through these, flag the ones that we want dealt with as a condition prior to public hearing.
Well, at least a range. Is that simple? Sure. Okay. Well, that's sort of what I'm trying to do, because I'm trying to ask council what they need to know and what they don't. Councilor Inkster.
So percentage of overall annual energy use from on-site renewable energy or rapidly renewable carbon fuels. So you want us then to determine an amount that we would like to see, pick an amount, and then with the...
No, I think you would like us to say we'd like to know what the negotiated outcome is before.
Okay.
Before public hearing.
Okay, well, I guess though, if we'd like to know, then council individually or as a group has to have an idea of what would be, in a sense, acceptable to us, or what we would like to see as part of a sustainable development. So that's something that I'll have to think about, because as part of a sustainable development, you would like them to, because they utilize that naming, that you would like to see them utilize higher standards than many of the other developments that have come before them in Sechelt. So let's then look at, if we're talking about this, then let's look at 24, provision of water efficient fixtures, landscaping, rain barrels, and reservoirs. So would that be 100% provision of water efficient fixtures, 100% provision of xeriscape landscaping, provision of rain barrels throughout the developments, and a number of designated reservoirs? Is that what we're talking about?
And would those be building code requirements? We'd actually put a covenant in that the builders have to meet those?
A number of these go beyond the building code.
Yeah, obviously,
yeah.
but how would we enforce them? Just by
The
making a
development
covenant?
agreement.
Development agreement, okay.
So that would continue then with the on-site water reuse for irrigation gray water systems. That would that be then connected to the number 24, 28 to 24?
Yeah, but I think it's important not to say in advance. I think it's important for the staff to have a chance to discuss what's possible and what's realistic. And it could come back and we'll say, yeah, that sounds good. I don't think we should be setting parameters at this stage. I think that's unfair for everyone.
No, and those that are of a concern, we'll take to council in advance of the public hearing before you schedule the public hearing.
All timber from a certified source was in the same. I thought that was really difficult all timber for the entire site. So that's. Okay.
We have discussed each of these conditions of a future development agreement with the applicant.
Yeah, but they're not quantified yet. They're just discussed. Yeah, we can work on that. We can do that, and that's the problem for most of us. I think that there's probably nothing else that we need in advance of public hearing. I didn't know what 41, ultimate creation of a zero waste community, really was. And I wasn't sure how you do provision of site-based facilities for all demographics, age, gender, ethnicity. That's a pretty broad statement. And that brings us to number 44, which Councillor Wright would like to speak to again, and Councillor Inkster has the floor, though.
Yeah, so these ultimate creation of a zero waste community, I guess that would be because we're looking for some form of definition that would be a larger version of dockside green.
Parts of it, yeah.
Yes, excuse me. Yes, and there are standards through LEED ND and a number of the other standards that we're using here for these. So all of these are based on recognized standards. And again, because it's a pretty long report, they all have background material and information and criteria and standards that we go to in order to answer a number of your questions.
Okay, because in reference to dockside green and some of the other questions I asked in reference to water conservation and such, these would be higher standards than, it would be matching a lot of the provisions of the sustainability plan, but these would be higher standards than exist in most of the rest of Sechelt.
And in most of the rest of the province.
Yes.
Including dockside green.
Those are pretty high standards.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we can refer to them, council can find those standards, and then you have you gotta go above them. Yeah. Okay.
Any discussion of 44?
You could remove it.
Councillor Mueller and then Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. I was curious at what point we were going to be seeing a retail impact assessment.
I've interviewed two firms and have one more to speak to before I get quotes from all three. A retail impact study.
Where is that identified? That's something
it's not. It's one that we're commissioning, and we're interviewing three firms that specialize in that kind of work.
And Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. This one, other amenities, can you give me an example of what we might be asking for under that?
No, I'm sorry. It was the final number. I think we wanted to end at the even number, but it can easily, if there's nothing else, then you could.
Yeah, to me, this one looked like a little bit of a blank check, and I guess I got to tell you, if I was signing that blank check, I would want to be in another country when you cashed it, okay? And it just, it's pretty wide open, and I would sure like to exercise the option on that one at some point in time for the district of Sechelt. That would be really interesting.
It was more after having gone through all of these conditions. If during this review you actually came up with something else, there's a placeholder for it.
So it was just sort of a catch-all clause.
Yes.
Wow. It was good for you for asking for it, but I'm not sure what we would get in it. It'd be really interesting to see. Thank you.
We'll leave it for now. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers, I think.
In regard to the economic impacts, will those studies look at the impact on downtown Sechelt, not just this property?
Oh, no, sorry, that's the point of the study. It's a retail impact study primarily to ensure they meet the criteria of downtown first.
Any further, Councillor Seegers?
Thank you. I'd like to leave number 44 in. If the developer's okay with it, it gives you some leeway to work with them.
I think, yeah, it'll disappear at some point, but it's okay. Okay, I think having gone through those, and I really appreciate the patience of both those who are in the gallery and staff as well. J, provision of an archaeological, I think that's a requirement. We don't really need that for public hearing. Though the sooner that comes through, the sooner we get SIB support. And they're one of the early referrals as well. So with a couple of studies that we'd like to see coming through for as first reading goes into the public hearing, and I think we made note of those as we went through, and it's on the floor. Any further discussion, that recommendation? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much for that patience. That takes us, I think, back to item 4 on the page 26. Council consider any changes to the density, land use, or other changes found in zoning amendment bylaw 25271 in accordance with the official community plan bylaw 2010 policies regarding resort development. This seemed a little unusual for us, but I think it was because Silverback was a resort. So we needed to be aware of the transition away from that into where we were going. Is that a good summary?
I think so.
And we've got the report in front of us. We've taken a look at it. Any discussion of that? Let's, anyone to move item 4? Councillor Seegers, thank you. Councillor Shanks, and that's on page 26. Any discussion of that transition from the resort development through to the new OCP amendments, new community? If we understand that, all in favor? So we have considered that. And what we've been waiting for all night, the council give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 25271 2016 and refer the bylaw to public hearing. Now, were there any things that we discussed now that would affect the zoning bylaw you brought forward to us?
There could be, and in talking with Mr. Vanderwolf, we could call the public hearing after second reading and before third reading, and we can make any of these minor changes at second reading and then call for the public hearing.
Okay. I would like to give it first reading if council would like to and supports it, and then hold off on public hearing until we actually see what adjustments have come place. And as those studies come through, we want those prior to public hearing. Councillor Inkster.
So does that motion have to go on the table before I speak to it, or should?
It should. Somebody to move first reading. Pardon? Oh, I see, yeah. Good question. What are we doing here in terms of process? We have on page 26, item 5, which is a recommendation to give it first reading. Then we will turn to the bylaw itself and give it first reading. But first, let's adopt item 5, which is a recommendation, and then we'll follow through on the consequences of that. No, we can actually, we don't, it doesn't say when to refer it to the bylaw, so we can deal with that when we do first reading. Councillor Inkster.
So it's been first and seconded, this
Yes.
particular one? Okay, so obviously this first reading, if it passes, there'll be a number of reports that need to come back to council. So standard process would have been that it would refer to a public hearing within, you know, the rules, which would be probably 2 to 3 weeks from now with advertisements, but that's not going to happen in this case. There'd be a number of reports, so it's going to be before second public hearing in a couple of months. Correct? Okay. Just trying to figure out the timing. Okay.
Okay. Recommendation number 5 before us. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Now, if we can move to item 8.1, which is page 161. And if we move to the end of that, on page 164, I would like to call for first reading of bylaw number 25271, 2016, CD 38, SSC Properties Limited, which is a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt zoning bylaw number 25, 1987, to rezone 10 parcels of land in the East Porpoise Bay neighborhood from Comprehensive Development Zone 13, CD 13, to Comprehensive Development Zone 38, CD 38, SSC Properties Limited. That's page 161, and the first reading, which would be April 6th. Somebody to move first reading. Councillor Seegers, thank you. Second is by Councillor Mueller. All those in favor of first reading?
Strange one.
Any opposed to first reading? It's carried. Thank you very much, and thanks a lot for the patience. 9:45. 8.2 is the official community plan amendment bylaw number, Councillor Seegers?
Are we talking of doing second reading or referring to public hearing at this point?
No, we're going to get the work done on it.
Just the first
It'll
reading?
come back.
Or second reading as well? No. Okay, thank you.
We'll do first reading. (8.2) Official Community Plan Amendment regarding the Clayton family lands. Page 1. See if I get the right pages here. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor of receipt? Welcome, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for waiting as well. Aaron is one of our newest employees in development planning, for those who don't recognize him. And would you like to speak to this, please? And yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a report that states that Council has considered the public input of both public hearings and all public written documentation for the Rockaway Ocean Stories development, and that it can then that Council has considered this, and that the public consultation is now complete, and that the bylaw can move to second and third reading.
Thank you. And it's fairly straightforward. It's in front of us. And was there any aspects of the solid waste plans or the liquid waste plans that needed to be drawn to our attention, or does it fit within those plans well enough?
In consideration of, do you mean like consideration of Section 477 of the Local Government Act? The OCP amendment and how that has affected the liquid waste management plan. Is that what you require? Yeah.
Yeah, we're about to say that we've considered this, and we have looked at your report, and in that we would normally want to know if there was any aspects which were incongruent or in which we were going to be in the wastewater plan, for example, couldn't be met.
For, I'm just making sure I understand this correctly. Am I thinking of the wrong project?
No?
Oh. Yeah, that was considered, that should have been considered at the last council meeting, I do believe, with section 477. And this report's merely about the public hearing input.
Maybe I've got the wrong page. I thought we were on 182.
Am I 8.2 is, oh, sorry, I'm confused. Sorry, I apologize.
Yeah, you're on 8.3.
Yeah,
I'm still on 8.2.
sorry. So this is for Clay and Family Lands. And yeah, I do apologize for that confusion. There is an increase of population density moving with the OCP amendment, and that should logically result in an increase of waste produced, and that will then, following that logic, will have an impact on the liquid waste management plan.
And I notice your note. You'll get used to the fact that liquid waste management plan is one of these current themes that runs through our lives here. That technically we never did complete the stage 3, and technically that means we actually never did complete the liquid waste management plan, though we were always supposed to. In 2000, we were getting that ready. And so, in fact, we don't have that entire plan approved with finance and implementation, which is one reason why we've run into trouble. Okay, anything from council? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. On the bottom of page 184, it says, for this property, the increase in unit density between residential and multifamily will result in an additional 104 units over and above what the community anticipated with the adoption of the OCP.
Yes.
This will increase the amount of liquid waste produced by the property and have an unanticipated effect on the capacity of the Sechelt Water Resource Center. So if it's higher than what was anticipated in the OCP, how does this then get addressed by planning and engineering to ensure that the cost is being, covered off basically by the developer?
There are DC, actually, wait, that? Sorry,
This is pretty unfair for the first public meeting, but so get as much support from the staff as you can.
Could you repeat the question again?
Thank you. It indicates that the development is going to result in an additional 104 units above what was anticipated in the OCP. So it increases the amount of liquid waste produced by the property and have an unanticipated effect on the capacity of the Sechelt Water Resource Center. So my question is, how is this showing up for the developer in compensating the district for the additional capacity that's required for the development?
So there are a couple of components we can contribute that cost associated with the improvement of the waste treatment plant. One is that DCC treatment DCC. We are going to update the treatment DCC with conjunction of the new cost for the expansion. So this is the way we are going to anticipate the cost from additional capacity.
I think that what councillors want to know, because you're actually not going to go and improve the wastewater facility in the next 3 years. We might have to do it in 6 years, but you're not going to. So there'll be DCCs collected. But we heard a report at the very beginning of this evening, which itemized all of the proposed and expected units and use. And then something comes along that adds 104 units. We would like to see that chart updated so we know, oh, okay, now we're at this spot and that's never been done. But in our view, good planning would mean that you would know what the anticipated use of the plant and capacity of the plant is. And then as people hooked up or expanded or we gave density bonusing, whatever, we adjusted that chart. So we would know that, oh, it wasn't 2021 when it's actually 2020 that we're going to meet or max out. So the DCCs will help us adjust when we get there. But now that we're finally getting a picture of the true capacity of the plant, and this is it's only been up and operating for a year and a half, but we're finally starting to figure out what the capacity is. We want to be able to track that in terms of the actual and practical hookups and use, because that's a murky part of this, that sort of in the smoke and mirrors of the last while, we all lost track of what was actually going on. Okay, Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, and obviously it plays into the percentage growth figures as well.
Yes.
You know.
Sorry, could I just finish up on that?
Councillor
Yeah.
Seegers, sorry.
So I would like, when this comes forward, I'd like to see how this gets covered off by the developer inside of the information that comes forward to us.
Okay. We received the report. Do we have a motion on the floor for the second recommendation? And Councillor Shanks has made it, seconded by Councillor Inkster. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, thank you for that. Now we move to item 8.3, I think. No, 8.2B. Okay. Page 189. I think it's 186, yeah, 186. Careful watch on the time. This is an OCP amendment. Bylaw number 49215, 2016, Clayton Family Lands Limited. A bylaw to amend District of Sechelt Official Community Plan Bylaw number 492, 2010, in support of an independent supportive housing or assisted housing facility and parkland exchange for first reading. For first reading? What did we do on the 16th of March? Then we had public hearing.
Yes, March 16th, it received first reading.
So we're at second reading.
So we're at second? Okay. Second reading is moved by Councillor Leitz, Councillor Seegers, thank you. Everyone on the same page? That's the most important part. 8.2A and page 187. All those in favor? That's carried, and we can give it a third reading tonight as well.
Actually, yes, because it's been for public hearing, you give all the balance of the readings now according to the local government.
I'd prefer to wait for adoption, but I could give it third reading tonight. Then we'll make sure we're on the right page. Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Seconded by Councillor Wright. And all those in favor of third reading. Okay, Councillor Seegers has a point of order, probably. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm confused. If I look at 8.2, it's actually under first reading. It's saying I don't believe we've had public hearing for this. We've had public hearing for Ocean Stories, but we haven't for this. It's April 12th is the public hearing on this.
So
8.2, we should be giving this first reading. And I'll move first reading.
The confusion for those of us that have paper in front of us is that page 187 has first reading identified as the 16th day of March, 2016. And so those of us who are looking at the document, but it's quite true that this has not gone to public hearing. That's what we're waiting for. So,
You can't give it second reading yet. The requirement of the local government
yeah.
is that public hearings be held between first and third reading, and if you want to give it second.
Yeah.
Give it second.
Let's start by giving it first. Let's rescind whatever motions we've just done, which was second. Yeah, let's rescind second reading. We didn't do third, didn't get it on the floor, but a motion to rescind second reading. Councillor Wright and Shanks, all those in favor? That's carried. No, we didn't do it. We just, it's going to die on the order paper. Third reading, we didn't vote or anything. So, first reading, Councillor Shanks. No, Councillor Seegers can move first reading. Seconded by Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? Okay, now. I don't see that. I would. Well, that's why we're confused, because we have the page number went out. This was reprinted a few times and we got different page numbers for different things. What I do have to have right now, though, is an emergency motion by a member of council. Councillor Shanks moves, and seconded by Councillor Darren Inkster, that we can extend the council meeting beyond 10 o'clock for this evening. Any objections? All those, one objection to speak to that? This is on extension.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just curious what the game plan on that would be, considering that we have up to 15 items left on the agenda.
We will deal with some. We will probably have to recess this council meeting at a certain point, and we'll have to take a look at the agenda and decide how much we can do between now and say 10:30, and then look at recessing and convening at another time. I don't think, well, I would look to council. Council can stay this evening until all issues are dealt with. That's one option. And one option is to recess at closer to 10:30 or 11.
Yeah, I would only be comfortable voting upon this if we set a hard deadline for this meeting. I think that from some of the mistakes that we've seen so far tonight, we're already.
The motion has to be unanimous, and if it wasn't, the meeting would be adjourned in 2 minutes, and we would reconvene when scheduled. I'd like to get this through, though, at the very least. And the second and third reading doesn't matter, but this does for the public hearing. So if you want a hard deadline, no more than 10:30. You can amend that. We'll extend tonight's meeting until 10:30. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. Let's straighten out what we're doing here with bylaw number. Item 8.2 on our agenda says official community plan amendment bylaw number 492, and it says page 182 to 185. So we have that. Aaron gives his report. We make the two recommendations. We moved to item 8.2A, which is page 186. And that one is printed as having been read on the 16th of March. Right. So somebody from staff can help us out on that. I think it was read too. So why should it even be in front of us? Corporate Officer, Mr. Vanderwolf.
Yes, Your Worship. We just checked the minutes, and yes, on that date, it did receive first reading, and it was referred to the public hearing on April 12th.
So it should not be on the agenda tonight, under any circumstances. Sir.
The report regarding section 477,
yes,
which you've already adopted, did need to be on this meeting, but the additional readings I do not believe were required.
And yes, this is another one, thank you, that came back because we had not considered them appropriately in view of the solid waste management plan, the District of Sechelt liquid waste management plan, and the registration. So that's what we needed to do tonight, and that's all we needed to do. These other things are probably, let's pretend they're just here for information as opposed to information items, and we'll just treat them as item 8.2 package. We have rescinded the mistake we made, that's good. We have confirmed the OCP amendment bylaw, so we've considered these in conjunction prior to it going to public hearing, which is a key thing to do. I can explain this later if people in the audience want to know, but there was drawn to our attention that some of the recent zoning bylaws and OCP amendments have not been properly considered in terms of the solid waste management plan. We needed to bring them back to consider them and follow due process. And that's what we were doing tonight. By mistake, the package included bylaws that we in fact shouldn't be looking at tonight. No, I want a motion to move on.
Motion to move on. Motion to move on.
It speaks to the fact of what happens when the agenda item gets too large, as Councillor Mueller spoke to. Now, for second and third reading, item 8.3, official community plan amendment bylaw on Rockwood Ocean Stories. And this is the Spaney development. We did have the public hearing for that only a week ago. Thank you, and Councillor Seegers to speak to.
Sorry, I was just going to move recommendations 1 and 2.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Lutz will, so Councillor Lutz moving 1 and 2 and Seegers seconding 1 and 2. It's the first time I can recall seeing this recommendation 2 phrased in exactly the way it is in terms of confirming that consultation has been early ongoing and is now concluded. And I've been in the business a long time. Councillor Shanks beside me says, he hasn't seen it before either. So somebody can explain this new phrasing and why we need to conclude that public hearing is over. I understand that part. Why do we need to confirm that our consultation was early, which it may or may not have been, and ongoing? Councillor Seegers.
We've always had, it's been early and ongoing. We've not had the concluded part.
Oh.
And that's part of the process that we have to say we've had early consultation and it's been ongoing through the process. The only part that I believe is new is now concluded. I've never seen that piece before.
Yeah, and I've never seen the early.
I've never seen.
So this is a process issue. It's a confirmation that council is aware of the process and has followed through. Any discussion of recommendations 1 and 2? All those in favor? It's carried. Now, the third recommendation is that we give second and third reading to the official community plan amendment and the zoning amendment. Let's deal with those separately. And let's just go to the official community plan amendment, which is page 353. And what we want to do is look at page 354 and a motion for second reading of the OCP amendment, Councillor Wright, Councillor Lutz. And this is a bylaw to amend bylaw number 49214, 2015, Rockwood Ocean Stories, a bylaw to amend District of Sechelt Official Community Plan bylaw number 492, 2010, in support of a 4-part multifamily residential and supported or assisted housing development. Any discussion at second reading?
Yes, thank you, Worship. I know that these reports on the public hearing don't just come here just to be accepted, and that they are here for discussion. There were a number of important substantive issues raised at the public hearing in a number of places, and I think now would probably be the appropriate time to discuss some of those.
Yes.
So maybe I'll just continue through. I've got about 3 points that I'd like to clarify with staff. So one of the first ones that was raised in a number of places was the traffic modeling. Where is that at? I assume there were some developments related to that.
The district staff provided in the terms of reference for the traffic study for the Binney and Associate. The Binney and Associate retained by the district retained by the Binney and Associate, and the developer pay for the study.
Has the study been done?
No. We provided terms of reference.
Okay, so if I can just follow up on that, the issues raised at the public hearing, I think, are important and substantive. in terms of figuring out exactly the appropriate use for Pilot Way and Medusa. Those are important questions that I think everybody here should be fully appraised of before we move to approve this. So that was my first point. My second one was about the use of rockwood. There were a number of community members that raised concerns about the pathway through rockwood, and if we look at this objectively, what we have is what used to be a real vital community amenity of rockwood, surrounded by trees, a beautiful place to hold the Festival of the Written Arts, would now be bordered on one side there, not by trees, but by a road and a very large building. So to me, that's a concern. I would definitely like to see the developer come back with some additional ideas as to how we can protect rockwood, being the community asset that it is, and being that the development itself is essentially named for rockwood. Maybe we want to improve that amenity as opposed to diminish it. And then my third one was on height. So the height issue was raised a number of times in these meetings. My question for staff is, right now, as the bylaw, the zoning bylaw currently stands, what's the allowable height?
To speak with the Rockwood path, to that first, myself and myself, Perry from Parks, and Doug Sweeney, along with a professional arborist, a landscape architect, and another architect, walked the proposed path and looked at some of the alternatives after hearing these issues raised by the public hearing, and looking at minimum disturbance, and that is still up for, I guess, negotiation of exactly where that accessible path will cut through Rockwood.
During the negotiations, was there any discussion of providing some additional amenity to Rockwood, or we just put in a path through it? Is that all that was discussed?
Yeah, at that meeting, it was only discussed of the way the path can go, what can be done to protect the areas, protect existing gardens, but there wasn't a discussion at that time of any alternative amenity.
The reason why I raised that particular issue is that the Rockwood is a community amenity. It's a community asset. It's district property, and we need to really think about how we want that used, not as an addition to a very large development, but perhaps as something that needs to be improved. So we can move on to the height questions if you would like to move on.
Yeah, I do not know the height off the top of my head of the existing zoning requirements. I believe it's approximately 10.5 meters under the existing R1 and R4. I could be wrong. And the proposed height is within the OCP parameters.
Yeah. So we're entertaining a height increase that is not in the OCP, and I think that. So what is that calculation?
It is within the OCP. The OCP does account for additional height up to 6 stories. Yeah.
So we're discussing 2 stories then, in addition, which would be precedent setting.
Yeah. And 9.5 meters.
9.5 meters. I do understand that this is an ongoing discussion, and that the zoning bylaw that was never adopted changes the way that we calculate the total height, but that so far has not been adopted. So every single developer in Sechelt now has to follow those rules as they have been. And so for us to go ahead and allow that precedent-setting change, there were a number of community members that indicated that that may set a precedent for the future height of all buildings in Sechelt, something that this council really needs to consider. Other than that, for me, the application itself is great. Great building in the right location. There's an identified need, but I think those 3 issues that I raised traffic modeling, impacts upon Rockwood, and the height are all things that I would like to see adjusted.
Thank you, Councillor Mueller. And Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, I'm not sure the height is precedent setting. Precedent was probably set with the watermark, but it's done on an individual basis, each project unto itself. The other issue that was brought up, though, was the parking issue on Medusa Street and Medusa Lane, I believe. Those were concerns in terms of adequate parking signs and whether or not the parking should be on both sides of Medusa.
So this is a matter of process, because I think a number of us have concerns. In my mind, I was going to go through the official community plan amendment and slow down on the zoning, because the issues that were raised by Councillor Mueller are shared, and I don't think we want to see the development go forward with the current concept plan for the so-called pathway, and we want to understand what the traffic patterns are. So how do we, in fact, help this move forward a little bit, because it's a good building in more or less the right location. But for those of us who are very disturbed at the fact that all the cedar trees beside the pavilion were cut down, and there's going to be, I mean, the whole ambience of the place has changed. And now the idea that somehow the gardens are going to become an amenity for the development as opposed to a community amenity is supposed to be the reverse. And so where do we do that in a way that we can effectively move things forward and make sure this works for the community? We'll go to staff first if we can get there, and then we'll go to Seegers, Inkster, and back.
Request that staff come back and deal with those, at least those three, and if other issues come up, we'll deal with those as a condition of further readings.
Can we do it on the zoning though, or do it on both, or do we just slow down on the OCP, or does it matter whether we do it?
You're asking, we're considering second and third reading, not adoption. So we could certainly bring material back and respond to your concerns.
Okay, as long as you know that adoption won't be forthcoming.
Yes.
Councillor Seegers?
Yes, that was what I was going to suggest too. We do second and third reading of both of them at this point, but knowing that staff is going to come back with information to address the concerns.
And technically, through to Councillor Mueller, we can rescind third reading if things don't work. Councillor Inkster.
So we've spoken to the number of concerns that were identified. Many of the people that spoke at the public hearing were in favor of the need for this building and the look of the building. But there was some consistency. The traffic was an issue. I don't know, unless we look at the Medusa, how we develop that or how we upgrade that, whether there'll be just one road in and one road out. So we have to give that some consideration from a plan point of view. In terms of we know when developments come in that they cut down the trees, and although we do have a tree bylaw in place where you're supposed to do envelope buildings, so that didn't happen. So what we need to, because that's happening, I would just ask planning two questions. Then further, the traffic one we've mentioned, the building height has an amenity, has a green space donation, as you know, an additional green space for every floor. So that can be covered off as long as those are met, unless we give a special, unless we say no to that. But the pathway through Rockwood, I had thought they were using an existing pathway and it wouldn't make many changes to Rockwood. So there's some confusion there, because you could actually just develop a pathway along the side, just enhance the existing pathway along the side. But also too, what's the green piece along the bottom part below the road there? What does that green mean? Does it just mean a border, or was there a planned buffer to be created?
Can you see it across there? It's sort of a blue-green.
It's the border of the whole property. It's the border of the whole property, no?
Yeah.
So it's not a...
No.
Okay, well that would be one way to deal with it, is to put a buffer up in order to deal with the buildings there. So just a suggestion as well as the others to look at ways to get around some of the concerns or to work with some of the concerns.
Okay, and I think Councillor Seegers, Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make sure we all know exactly where we are in the process right now. So just through to the recording secretary. So we have second and third reading on the table. It's been moved in second. Is that correct?
Just second, I think.
Just second reading? Yes. Okay, thank you. And
of the official community plan bylaw.
Of the official community plan. And just further to the planner, if there's questions, the hearing's closed, but if there's questions that council has clarification, that material can come back in between the second and third reading so that we clearly understand so council clearly understands where we are moving ahead. So that definitely is an option to have staff come back with better clarity or revised
zoning
as instructed by council. Yes.
Okay, that's good. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So a follow-up question to our CAO on that first, and then I'll get to my question. If we do second and third reading now, can we still bring clarification back prior to adoption?
Yeah, it's more of a question for the planner. You can do both readings, but if you need some additional clarification, you'll need to rescind the third reading. The more cautious approach, again, we may want to just affirm with the planner, would be to do just second reading and do a third reading at a future time.
Thank you. Okay, so then with regards to the path through Walkwood, that actually came from our accessibility advisory committee. No, that's what we were told, that was a recommendation, the accessibility advisory committee. So yes, we need some more information on that. Thank you.
And Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. The path through Rockwood, if I recall the numbers, the path was going to be expanded to 10 feet in width, and the question was asked, was the slope going to be accessible by somebody who was in a wheelchair? And the answer to that is yes, it was. And that meant that the path was going to have to be considerably switchbacked through that property and would in fact pretty much destroy the property. And that was one of the concerns that was raised by the public. So I think we really do need the answers back on that one. Thank you.
Okay. So any further discussion of second reading of the official community plan amendment? Councillor Mueller? And did we say at 10:30? Yeah. Okay.
I just, being that we were presented today with the urban systems wastewater expansion, are we, has staff had a time to digest that and understand exactly what that means for charges relating to this development? I understand it's much more simple than the other ones. Is there additional work that needs to be done on that?
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, I think we put it in our strategic plan. Any further discussion of second reading of the OCP bylaw amendment? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. Currently, we're reviewing our DCC bylaw.
We'd like to.
Will this project fall under the current DCCs, or will it fall under the new DCC as we're going to have it updated? Because I suspect, I don't know what the numbers are, but I suspect there's a considerable amount of money being left on the table here if it falls under the existing DCC bylaw.
There's usually a grace period when you introduce new DC bylaws, anywhere from 6 months to a year. So on that basis, this project would fall under current DCCs.
So we've already lost that money.
We can consider it a contribution to economic development because it gives a great incentive for developers to work before we get the DCC bylaw in. How's that for a spin? Any further discussion of second reading? All those in favor? That's carried. And now we'll go to the zoning bylaw, and same thing. We'll look for second reading, knowing that it's got lots to come back, and in particular the items that have been identified. So it's been to public hearing, 29th of March, and somebody to move second reading, Councillor Shanks and Lutz. Discussion at second reading, all of the above, so people know that we really are serious about that. And all those in favor? That's carried. Now, I think we should leave 8.4, go to 8.5, page 375. Yeah. Which is for adoption, and it's a bylaw to amend the business improvement area. Somebody to move final adoption. Sorry, Councillor Seegers.
I'd question through you to financial staff. Are we not on a timeline with regards to this financial plan for adoption? Or
It has to be adopted before the property tax bylaw. So I think we're scheduled for that on May the 4th. It can be on the same day. It just has to be before.
We are on a timeline, and we will not deal with the financial plan in 6 minutes. Yeah, so let's get as much as we can get done, schedule a meeting, and it'll be special. Somebody to move adoption of business improvement area bylaw number. Thank you, Councillor Inksters and Seegers, 4961 2016. Any discussion of adoption? All those in favor? That's carried. Now, we have several remedial action, one remedial action, one building law contravention, an occupancy permit. Are any of those items that people see between 10:1 and 10:10 possible to do in 5 minutes? I don't think so. 10:5, which is appointment of an acting corporate officer, yes. Page 412, this is the appointment of the CAO as a deputy corporate officer for those times when, and I have one more I'd like to do. 10.5, page 412, if people have that.
I'll move recommendations 1 and 2.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Seegers. Any discussion? This is required because we have to appoint individuals and not just go by organizational charts. All those in favor? Thank you. I think at this point, rather than trying to race through one or two, we should just adjourn the meeting. And would it be an adjournment or a recess? Okay, that's page 410. 1 and 2 moved by and seconded by Councillor Lutz. There's two individuals who feel they may have a perceived conflict because they're active in car clubs. So they'll step aside.
Go outside.
So they can't participate in the discussion. Turn the lights on, turn the lights on. Okay. Any discussion of the dates? We've gone over the dates, we've discussed them. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
I want to talk about this one.
No, we don't have any time. Okay. To the corporate officer, would this be a recess or an adjournment? This meeting has to be carried on, or an extension. What's the correct? Is Monday afternoon possible for people?
No, I'm away, well.
Is a quorum possible on Monday?
Are you going to be there?
Otherwise, we wait till Wednesday.
I would recommend Wednesday.
Wednesday again, okay. I think we need to then say a motion to recess this meeting until a time to be arranged on Wednesday, April 13th. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor. Discussion. All those in favor? That's carried. My apologies for all of the items that aren't dealt with. And it's a lesson to all of us in terms of control of the agenda. Are there any questions from the public or the media for tonight? Christine.
I was wondering, first of all, it's on the page 31 of SSC. Is condition number 27 get pulled out about the?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I was wondering what the next steps are in light of the urban systems report.
Well, we received it tonight, and so we haven't had really a chance to adjust or digest it. It's going to inform staff on a number of issues, and next time council meets, not the recess when we come back, but the next time we come back, I'm going to be recommending that we embark on a liquid waste management plan review and update. And that will inform that. That'll probably, though I'll make the recommendation soon, it'll wait until we have a director of engineering in place. But it's clear that we need to know much better what our capacities are, what needs to be done, and what order that needs to be done in. And we don't have answers to those. I'll just see if anything else on that. Pam?
Whatever you call it, when you go back from a recess, it's set on Wednesday?
Yes.
Is that going to be in the daytime? Because it's really good. We got also another two
Yeah.
meetings on Wednesday.
I haven't checked the time, so I don't know.
Gosh, no, I mean, people work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be able to come to these things even if they're being recessed and brought back.
I understand that. It depends what, yeah, it depends what's scheduled and what else times we can put it on. Some of them we simply have to get through. And so it may be in the morning and it may be something we do through Wednesday to finish. So we have to look at our calendars and see what we can do. And if we can't do it Wednesday, we'll have to try another date.